Welcome to GenX Adulting. And today we have Julie Fahy with us, who is the co host of the You Keep Me Sane podcast. Welcome, Julie.
Hi, good to be here.
We're so happy to have you. And I should mention, you are our first non US guest. You are in Australia.
I know, I feel so honored actually. I didn't realize that I was the first. So, yeah, I'm in Melbourne, miles
We're
away.
so excited. We're so excited. We actually have quite a few listeners and followers from Australia. It's really cool. So we were extra excited to have you on and kick off getting a little bit outside of America with this with you. So
Yeah, I'm
extra welcome.
excited. Thank you. Actually, I was looking at your Insta page, oh, this is months and months ago, and a lot of people I know follow you. It was strange. I'm like, wow. So this obviously resonates a lot in
Oh,
Australia.
that's cool.
Oh,
That is
cool.
Yeah,
really cool to hear. Okay, so our first question is always, what year were you born?
1976.
So you are Gen X.
I'm Gen X. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
where were you born?
So I was born in a little town called Woodford, which is it's in Australia, in Queensland. So I don't
Mhm.
know how much of the Australian geography you know, but it's sort of southeast Queensland, which is the state on the east of Australia, northeast of
Okay.
Australia, in the countryside. So probably an hour from Brisbane. Don't know if you
Okay.
know Brisbane, but
Yeah. And I'm gonna represent the listeners that aren't familiar with Australia, and ask probably to some people, especially Australians, will sound like stupid questions, but for our listeners who aren't aware, can you explain? Is Australia? Do you guys have states like we have states? Are you divided up like that? Or are they provinces? How is it?
yeah, states, exactly like America in that way. And so every state has the capital city. So Brisbane's the capital of Queensland. And so I lived sort of an hour and a bit from Queensland, which doesn't feel so remote now, but growing up, it was much more remote. I mean, now it's kind of commuter belt-ish to Brisbane, but it was pretty rural growing up.
Okay. How many states are in Australia?
Okay, I've actually got to count. Not like the States. It's not like 52. We got
Right,
like
right.
one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, and so seven states. But then Canberra is a territory, Australian Capital Territory. So that's our
Okay.
capital. Of Australia is Canberra, and it's part of a territory, which is sort of Australian Capital Territory. So it's a state, but
Okay.
it's not called a state as such.
Kind of like Washington, D.C. for us, right? It's our
Oh, okay.
capital, but it
Yeah.
covers like a few states. Like for us, it
Well,
covers,
DC kind of sits in between a few
it
states. Yeah,
sits like
that's
Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware, I believe, is what D.C. touches.
Okay. Yeah, well, this is like its own. So you have Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria. It's sort of part of New South Wales is cut out and it's its territory. So it's not part of New South Wales, the state.
Oh,
So it's its
interesting.
own,
Okay.
like, but the city's Canberra and it's Australian Capital Territory. I've got no idea why it's like that, but it is like a state, but it's just not called a state as such. It's its own
Okay.
area.
Yeah,
So.
that makes sense.
yeah.
And then where you grew up, were you near the coast at all?
So about 50 minutes drive from the
Okay.
Sunshine Coast. I don't know if you know. So Brisbane has like Sunshine Coast to the north, Gold Coast to the south. You might have heard more of the Gold Coast. There's a lot of filming stuff happening
Yes.
around there. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's south of Brisbane, and I was an hour north of Brisbane, which is the Sunshine Coast. So equally beautiful, equally, coastal environment, but I was inland. So where I grew up an hour inland of that coast in the
You know what's
mountains.
funny is for Americans, though, an hour inland from the coast is close to the coast. Like
Right.
so for those of
Yeah.
us who live in that would live an hour away from the beach, we call it the beach.
Yeah.
Um, that would be like you still live by the beach or by the coast,
Yeah.
or from Jersey, they call it the shore. But because it's so
Ah.
huge here, you know what I mean? That if you even get within probably an hour and a half, it's like, oh, you live by the beach. So
Really?
yeah, so for us, 50 minutes is like, oh yeah,
If you
Nothing.
were in
yeah.
the dead center of Australia, how far would it be to go to the coast or the beach?
Oh, days. You would be
Really?
driving for days.
Okay.
That's what I always said because I lived in Europe for so long, and
Mhm.
I was in Germany, you can drive across Europe. You can drive for, say, a day, or maybe you drive for, I don't know, 2 days, half a day. You can go through so many countries. Australia, you can drive for a week or more and you still be in Australia. It's a bit like the States. So if you were in
Yeah.
the center of the States, if you were going to go to the coast, it would be a long haul,
Yeah.
right? So similar.
Absolutely.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So remind me of the name of your town again where you were born.
It's called Woodford.
Woodford. So,
Yeah.
were your parents from there, or your grandparents? Like, how many generations back does it go where your family settled there?
Well, that particular town, my parents moved there when I was 8. I was
Okay.
born in Brisbane. So Brisbane is where pretty much all of my family are from, and my,
Okay.
generations back. Yeah. Or maybe
Okay.
my
So, you,
mum's parents were sort of born, well, they were from up north. I don't actually know where they were born, but I know they were up north Queensland. But it's all Queensland and pretty much Brisbane. But we moved out to the countryside. Well, countryside, it might sound coastal, but we didn't look at it as coastal.
right, right, right.
Yeah, when I was 8. So,
So, from the time you were born to 8, you were in Brisbane. Was that like a city?
yeah. Yeah. So that was city.
Like urban or like suburban?
Suburban, pretty much. We didn't live right. I mean, I don't know. Brisbane at the time, it's grown a lot. It wasn't massive city,
Mm-hmm.
not by New York standards or London or anything, or even Melbourne. But now it's getting bigger. But at the time, yeah. So we were. I don't know. You might drive 20 minutes into the center of town, but where we were was pretty suburban. It was, yeah, and it was still growing. I mean, when my dad's a builder. When he built our house, it was on an estate, so it was just land, and they bought a plot, and houses were popping up and all that sort of thing. So
Do you know how your parents met?
they met, well, so they met ballroom dancing, but
Oh my gosh,
they,
that's so
I know
cool.
it's so cool, and
Yeah.
they were ballroom dancing partners. They got matched together, which is so cool. But they knew each other, I think, roundabout because they lived in the same area. So I don't know all the stories, but I think mum might have been in the same class as one of dad's sisters, or I think there was
Sure.
they knew of each other before that, but
Okay.
then they were paired up when they
Do you know
were
how
ballroom
old they
dancing.
were for the ballroom dancing when they met? How old they were?
Um, I don't, but I think they got married at 19. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I
Is
think
that
they got
young?
married.
Like
It's
for
very young.
Australian standards, that's young.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you know
okay.
what? It is young, and I always think it's young. But when I look at my family, so my brother, I don't know exactly now. He got married, I think he was 21 or maybe 22. Yeah, he got married at 21. See, because in the country town where and I don't know if it's like this in the States, in sort of rural communities, I guess, I don't know, but they still
Mhm.
do kind of get married young. Like my brother's son, now how old would he be? He was born in 2002, 24. He's just getting married this year. And then
Yeah.
his brother, who's 2 years older, already has a child and is engaged, so even though I guess my parents, yeah, it's considered young, but still in those communities, I think a lot of people still get married. I mean, I didn't get married till I was 35, but
Yeah.
I
it's,
think it's like that
It
in
is.
more rural areas
Yeah.
here.
In small towns.
Kids get married.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
they get married. We got married young at 23, but that was very
yeah,
unusual. Like our friends, I think,
That was
thought we
like
were
straight out of
crazy.
college.
That was right. That was not normal. And that was back in 94. But yeah, in America, in small towns, typically, I think people
But if
still
you
get
go
married
back to
young.
your parents'
yeah.
generation, there's probably been an increase in when people get married in the US. I'm sure Australia might be the same, but it wouldn't be uncommon for like people our parents' age to get married at a younger age.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. I think that's probably a global thing too, right?
Probably.
Like
Yeah.
that generation would have got
Yeah.
married pretty young. I
So
mean,
when they got married at 19, was your dad already a builder?
yeah. So I think, yeah, he didn't finish school at like grade 12. I don't know what grade he went to, say grade 10 or something, and then did a trade. And so he was
Oh,
a builder.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And my
And
mum
then,
was a dental nurse, but she gave up as soon as she had the kids. And yeah, very
okay. So
typical.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Are you the oldest?
Second eldest, I have a brother who was born in 75, and
Mm.
then me in 76. And then I have a sister, 78, and another sister, 1980. So there's four of
Okay.
us,
So all Gen X, all 4 of you, even
all
your
Gen
young.
X.
Yeah, she just squeezed in.
Just, yeah. Yeah.
So
Just squeezed
yeah.
in.
So after so your parents are in, am I saying it right? Brisbane? Am I saying that
Brisbane.
correctly?
Yeah, it's
Brisbane.
yeah, it is. You are saying it correctly, but a lot of Americans, because I was in LA for a long time, say Brisbane. I've
Yes.
heard that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, and I'm from Oregon, and a lot of people say Oregon. but it's
Oh,
Oregon.
really? Oregon,
Same.
yeah.
Oregon, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Brisbane. So your parents have your brother, your mom becomes a stay-at-home mom, your dad's a builder. It sounds like they had at least the first three of you in Brisbane. All four,
All of
just
us.
all of you,
All of
and
us
then
in
they moved.
Brisbane. Yeah. Yeah. So I was 8 when we moved. So my littlest sister would have been 4
Do you know why
when
they
we moved.
moved?
That, you know what? It's interesting because I see them as a very conventional family, and but at that time, moving out to the country like that must have been massive. I've actually said this to them since, and they're like, "Yeah, people did think we were a bit, because it's
Yeah.
an hour away. We moved to a 40-acre property, and Dad we lived in a shed for 2 years while Dad built our house, and my grandparents lived in a caravan beside while he built their house. I think they were just those kind of people, I guess. They just wanted to change. They wanted to live in the country. I mean, Dad had grown up on property, which was in Brisbane still, but it's where the airport now is in Brisbane. So it was on all like this place called Crib Island, which is like its own island where his family, the Jacksons, he was one of 10, and they grew up there, and they had horses and so I think for him, he always wanted that space, and so yeah, it was enough. And then
Makes perfect sense.
my mum's
Yeah.
parents moved out too.
So it
That's cool.
sounds like he did literally what is my dream is like a family compound. He got a bunch of property. He built the house for you guys, the family house, the house for his parents, and
It
the
was my
house for
mum's parents,
your mom's parents. Okay.
just my
So
mum's parents. Yeah,
so you had your grandparents on property, and
yeah.
that sounds absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Looking back, I mean, I loved it actually growing up. I did love it. But at the same
Yeah.
time, I look back now and we go there now and everyone's like, this is heaven because friends come up there and it's still a 40-acre property surrounded by forestry, hasn't really been built up where they are, except for in the town, which is 10 minutes drive to the closest town, which at the time we couldn't really do our grocery shopping there. You had to drive 30 minutes to do the grocery shopping. So it is, it was beautiful and it was idyllic, but for some reason, I guess I was the black sheep. I was always like, there's more, what?
Okay.
And whilst I loved it and whilst I was younger than the sort of 15 where you start to go a bit crazy, we were doing crazy stuff. We just lived on this property on the weekends, as kids, we're climbing trees, we're exploring, we were on swollen rivers. It would flood. So we'd get flooded in for days. The rivers were massive. We took the fins off our boogie boards. Do you know boogie boards?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, fins off the boogie boards down these raging rivers where there was barbed wire, I mean, who knows what could have happened. But so all of that, loved it. We even had a bush basher car, which little ute thing that Dad had bought, which we just drove. I think it got, bingled up a million times. I don't even know what happened to it, but driving that around, it was awesome. We had a lot of freedom.
Was that you and your siblings, or would you guys have friends come and you guys would all just take over the property?
It was the siblings. We had cousins because I have about 40 something first cousins, which
Wow.
is a lot because my dad's one of 10 and my mum's one
Yeah.
of 4. So between all of those, so we had cousins would come at the weekend, and then we'd have friends come and stay for the weekend because it wasn't the kind where they can just duck in for an hour and go home. They were there. They were dropped out by their parents and they'd stay the night. So, but the crazy stuff was more with my siblings and my
Would they
cousins
pitch
probably.
tents or something? Like if you have that many people out? Or does
If we
everybody-
had, yeah, well, I don't know, to be honest. As a kid, you don't remember these things, but everything just happens when you're a kid.
That's because your
That's
mom
true.
took care of it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now
Now
you
that I'm
know.
a mom, I get
Yeah, your
Yeah.
mom took care of it.
exactly.
Because it is a lot of people, but she figured it out, So, and the
Yeah.
towels, the sheets, the pillows. Now but as
Now
a
I
kid,
know.
you wouldn't have thought
No.
about that. So,
No.
when you were in Brisbane, though, because that's like kindergarten through what, second or third grade. Were you feral in Brisbane? Did you have that freedom in the urban or suburban area, or did they not really kind of let you guys go until you had moved out into the country?
Yeah, I don't know. I was up to third grade. I mean, my dad was very much about you do things for yourself, which I loved because he was very practical. So we were very independent in that way. Like he always made sure we could, and mum as well, even. So I remember feeling like I could do it. You know, I've been being in the garage and making up, potions and building stuff, wet sand. Like, we were kind of free like that. But I don't think in terms of going out around the neighborhood. I mean, my auntie lived just down the road, so we'd go down there. And I remember starting to walk to school on our own. But I don't remember so much that kind of spatial freedom of being outside the house. We had a big backyard and
Yeah.
we went cycling a bit, but I don't know. I don't remember that aspect of it.
Not
pretty
like,
young.
yeah, but I mean, even though
Yeah.
here in America, like for us Gen Xers, there are many of us that were 6 and 7 on bikes and we'd leave and not come back till the streetlights came on. We were like young little kids and our parents
Yeah.
had no clue where we were. And we were in
Yeah.
rural, we were in urban, we were in suburban. And it was literally like how you would see in the movies, just gone, like
Yeah.
ET or whatever, they'd be gone on their bike. It was like that. And a
Yeah.
lot of times, if you were 5, 6, 7, maybe you were with your older sibling who was 9, but it was
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
pack. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So I was curious, like in Australia, was it like that in the suburbs as well? Or was it a little more, were you guys a little more protected?
I think it was like that because I talk to a lot of friends now who are also Gen Xers here because we talk about it in relation to our kids. And a lot of them are like, gosh, at this age, I was, cycling here and doing this. And so I think there wasn't that worry about whether we went out and did whatever. And I think it's just more circumstantial. Like my cousin was up the road and my mum was always around. I remember cycling our bikes around the house. We had quite a big plot. And so we would like be cycling all around. Like I don't remember though going really up the street because there wasn't a shop nearby really from where we lived. I remember going to
Right.
school and back on my own. But also my mum, I guess because she had the 4 of us, so she'd walk to school anyway because I had the 2 younger
Yeah.
siblings. So we'd go on ahead. But so I don't know why, but yeah, ours wasn't really as much like that, although there was no breaks on it possibly being like that. But in general in Australia, I think it was like America, absolutely, because everyone talks about the same thing. Yeah, I was just cycling to school at 6 and mum and
Right.
dad had no idea where I
Right. Right.
was
Right.
or, yeah, same thing.
Did you guys have the experience of missing children on milk cartons in Australia, or was that just an American thing?
I don't remember that, but I remember, was it milk cartons? I remember seeing it some missing kids things, but not like I think I remember from the movies more, if I'm
Okay.
honest, which is probably American.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you weren't eating your cereal in the morning and reading about a missing kid like that was normal, and then just going, no one talking to you about it, and you just go to school and that's just how it is.
Yeah.
That didn't happen.
I don't remember. I do not remember that, but I remember the concept of that. So I don't know whether that's from movies or whether it's from Australia, but it wasn't in my
It wasn't it
world.
wasn't on your dining room
You're not
table.
scarred like the rest of us.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think I'm scarred by that one. Unless my parents were like hiding stuff from us, possibly. But
Yeah, I mean, your parents sound like, because I always say Gen Xers, as we were all feral, but there's also the Gen Xers who did have very healthy home lives and parents who were very supportive, very involved, were aware of what was going on. Brian came from that as well.
yeah,
So there, and no divorce. Like I come from divorce. I come from upheaval. He comes from more traditional. Sounds like you also come from more
yeah,
traditional. So as much as you had the freedom to go whitewater rafting with your boogie board down a giant, river that might have
In a
barbed
flood
wire,
state.
yeah, it was still in this idyllic 40-acre heaven that your parents created for you. So you
yeah.
had honestly the best of both worlds, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, I think I was very lucky in that sense because mum was around, but
Yeah.
equally we had that absolute free range when we were younger. And
Yeah.
especially, I remember more because I guess at 8 was when we moved. So my main memories of how it was on the property, and that was very much free range. So we were able to do what we, and mum, I look back now as a parent, because I guess I don't know if it's being an older parent or whatever it is, but you know, the mess and the this and that, like you kind of let your kids do it, but it's always a pain in the neck and it's always, whereas mum had a bag of like old clothes that we'd grown out of that we'd put on and go mudsliding. We ripped up the grass on these like hills and we would just be down there all day mudsliding. And mum had this bell thing and she could ring at meal times if we wanted to come up for food. But
That is
and
amazing.
now and the snakes, you know, like I think now, like I would be freaked out of if my kids at that age, like 9, I guess it was 8, 9 when I first went there, and we were doing it from day one. And just
Yeah.
the swimming, like now, even at that age, I don't think they were even around. The dam was massive. We were in the dam. It was just whatever we wanted to do. And I think now, if that were my kids at 8 or 9, well, I know it because I went home with my kids little, and I was always like, oh, the snakes or the river or the what, they're going to kill themselves. But there
Yeah,
was
yeah.
none of that. Like Mum, I don't think she even panicked. I don't know. Maybe she did secretly, but we never knew
Yeah,
that.
I think it was different. So that's that feral, right? That's that feral experience you had. And so when you went there with your children, you were probably helicoptering a bit, just like most of us Gen X parents, because we wanted to create, well, for those of us who came from damage, we wanted to create the childhood that we always wanted and become the person we needed as a child. For people like you and Brian, you had that, but still with some you didn't have safety barriers really. So then now, as your parents become parents, then you're more on top of it with safety, probably. Like, did you find that when you were there with your young children, you were going with them to the river and you were keeping an eye on them around the water?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Until very recently, like my daughter last Christmas, I remember we had friends from Melbourne come up with us, and she had a friend there, same age. So they would have been 12. And that was
Oh,
kind of the first time that I was like, okay, you can go down to the creek, you know, on your
yeah.
own. But also my husband, so he's 60. He was born in
Okay.
65. And so
Okay.
he was older again, having
Yeah.
kids. And I think with age comes that paranoia that, you know, you have more existential thoughts yourself.
Yeah.
And then obviously about your kids, you're like, oh my goodness, they're going to just kill themselves. But
Yeah.
so he was very much, even more than me, on top of, oh my goodness, they're gonna die. Like we have to
Yeah. Yeah.
protect them.
That's
Because
hilarious.
when you're young, you still have ignorance of bliss and
Yeah,
also information overload now. You know, with technology, we know almost so much that it's
too
analysis
much.
paralysis, too much.
Yeah.
So it kind of
Well, you
takes away,
know,
you know.
yeah, you know what can happen, and I
Yeah.
think that's the thing because when our parents had kids as well, they were quite young, so they had that factor. It was different generation, but they were also younger. Whereas we,
Yeah.
you know, I was 35, my husband was 45 when we had kids. And you know, I mean, shit's gone down in life and you know what can happen and you've
Yeah.
experienced it, you've lived it, you've survived it, you've seen what's going on. And then you have these little kids and you're older and you realize the value of those kids. I think when you have them younger, this kind of like, you know, it's what you do. And you're also more egocentric when you're younger. So you're not
Yeah.
thinking as much about the kids. Whereas when you're older, you're like, you've lived. I mean, my husband and I, especially, we both lived all over the world. We've traveled a lot. We've done a lot. So we're at this point where we had kids and we're like, oh, wow, these are like these amazing, precious little things. This is awesome. Sense of
Yeah.
purpose, all that stuff. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, you send them into a snake pit, you're freaking out. You can't
Yeah.
just go, oh, off you go.
Yeah. It's true. And when you have kids young too, you're also building your life. So you don't have as much, right? Monetarily. You're building your wealth, you're building your career, you're building so there's focus that goes on to that too. So
Yeah.
whereas maybe when you have children older, some of that is already there's a foundation of that. So you can focus more, give more attention
Yeah.
to the children because you're not as
Yeah.
focused on that.
Yeah,
So
you're
when you
established. So it's different.
yeah,
Well, I think the
exactly.
key word you
Exactly.
mentioned is you survived. And you realize when you hit a certain age where you're like, holy shit, I survived. I did some crazy stuff. I'm glad I'm lucky I'm here.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
you're younger, I
Yeah.
don't reflect on it quite as much to realize some of the stupid things you did or situations you put yourself in, like boogie boarding down a swollen, flooded river with barbed wire.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
picture that.
Yeah. Oh,
I
totally.
Yeah.
wouldn't let my kids do it though.
No.
But
No.
maybe if I was, I
Are
don't
you
know,
kidding? Like we
25 and
we're
they're
total helicopter. I say
Yeah.
it all. I'm helicopter for my own reasons because of coming from such a chaotic childhood. So I was like, I was aware of all the things because I went through it. Your helicopter, just because of that natural
The milk
safety
carton.
thing, the milk carton and all that.
The trauma from the milk carton.
People
It's
do
like
bad things in this
balancing.
world.
So when you were in elementary school, which you started in Brisbane and then you transferred schools out to the country, was that a big change for you going from a school like in a more urban environment to a rural school?
Probably not so much because it was a decent size. I remember I was always quite anxious, and not that that was a label or an acknowledgement of anything, but I know I always felt so that was quite hard for me. And I remember, I spent because we had to wait half an hour at school for the school bus, like after school, because the bus going out to the property came half an hour after school finished. So we waited. And I remember going into the class, I guess I was kind of probably a nerd, but at the time, not knowing that I'd help the teacher out in the classroom, cleaning up the paints and all that sort of stuff. So I was always kind of involved, and I loved school. I loved studying. So I was kind of hooked into that, but I did get anxious about friends. Like I sort of always was a bit nervous about that sort of thing. So it was more that rather than the actual change of setting. It was more just the change of cohort, having to fit in, that kind of thing bothered me.
Had you established a social circle in Brisbane, like for here it's called preschool, kindergarten, and then elementaries. So preschool is like 3 to 5, and then kindergarten's 5, and then elementary 6 and up. So it feels like you did your preschool, kindergarten, and 1st through 3rd in Brisbane through those years. Did you have a little group or a best friend or anything?
Yeah, I had one specific best friend because I didn't go to, because my mom was home, I didn't start anything until I was 5, which was called preschool. So I did preschool, and then I did years 1, 2, and 3 when I was there. And so, I had a best friend, and I had close friends. I don't remember now, maybe at the time, but I don't remember now grieving them. I don't remember. They used to come up because my mum was stay-at-home mum. So she was heavily involved with the mums of those people. So I remember them visiting us for years later. It dropped off in frequency, but they came up to visit us. So we had that, but also because again, my mum was stay-at-home mum, we were very hooked into my family. So I was always with cousins. And so at that young age, I guess my cousins were super important to me. And we always saw them. And my mum's mum was super important to me because we spent a lot of time with her as well. And so because grandma moved up there with us, and then my cousins were visiting all the time, either staying at my grandma's house or our house, I think the transition was kind of smoother than it might have been for other kids.
That makes sense. And then when you started school in, remind me again, the town.
Woodford.
I don't know.
Woodford Reserve.
Yeah, I just thought about that, the wine. Woodford, when you started school in Woodford, did it take you a while because you would have been 3rd grade or 4th grade?
I went into 4th grade. So we moved up there. Our school year starts in January. So we moved up that summer. So our summer is over Christmas. So we moved up over Christmas during our summer break. And then I started in January in year 4.
I totally forgot about that. Your seasons are very different from ours.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're going into autumn now. So
that's wild. We're going into spring.
So you just finished, what did you just finish? What
So
season?
I finished grade 3 in the December.
Yeah.
Had our summer break, and we moved up during the summer break. And then
how long's your summer break?
It's 6 weeks in primary school, and then we have 8 weeks now with the kids there in high school. But
so your school season is January to like October-ish?
January, well, sort of end of January till beginning of December. That's our school year.
Okay,
so we pretty much have, I guess, depending on where it sits, and at some point 6 weeks within December and January we have off. So we have that double whammy as parents. I'm sure you'll appreciate this.
So we have this about it now.
So you hit Christmas, you hit the end of the school year, you hit summer holidays all at once. It's nuts.
Why? Why do that?
Nuts.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Wow.
No, and you don't even have that long of a break because our summer is 9 weeks. And
wow. Okay.
and we get 2 weeks off for Christmas break. We
Okay.
get a week off. We just finished a week of spring break. We get Good Friday off. We get, President's Day off. We get the week of Thanksgiving off. So we
Okay.
have lots of times off, but our summer is 9 weeks.
See, that's a lot.
And
Well, now ours is because our kids are in a high school, private high school. So they get, the more you pay, the less they're at school.
Yeah, yeah.
So we
that's so
have like,
okay.
so
But
that's
you
8 weeks.
but during your break, you have to do Christmas.
It's insane. So you can imagine our November, right, and December. So especially like 2 years ago, my daughter finished primary school. So you know what it's like. You got the graduations, you got like the million things you got to show up to, the end of school, this and that, and then all the end of school year teachers' presents, acknowledgements, all that going on while you're trying to prepare for Christmas, which is again another whole layer. And then you got the summer holidays, so you're planning what you're going to do. So as soon as that's over, you're entertaining the kids now it's 8 weeks now, but it's pretty nuts. When I started, because the kids were born in London, so we didn't actually move to Melbourne until my son was 6. So he had done a couple of years school over there already. So I didn't, you always thought, oh, gee, Christmas, it's hectic. But then I moved here. It was like, boom. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's wild.
It's so wild. It's so wild. And also, that's wild for the teachers because
Yeah.
they also have to do Christmas during their quote unquote summer break. That's
Yeah.
crazy. I'm going to
It
say
is
extra
crazy.
prayers for all the
But then they
mothers.
finish though for the year. So they done before they finish like, I don't know, mid-December. Or sometimes 19th of December they'll finish work. And then
Yeah.
they're off for 6 weeks as well. But yeah, they
I mean,
haven't
that
had the
sounds
lead
pretty
up.
good. What's wrong with that for the teachers? That sounds
Because
pretty
they
good.
have to do Christmas for their family, which is going to take up easily a week,
Yeah.
week and a half, and let's push it to 2 really. And then do you finally feel like you're done? And then they only have 4 weeks left, and then they
Yeah.
have to start a whole new
I guess
year.
it goes Christmas, then New
Yeah.
Year's.
This is the
Yeah.
thing, you don't get the downtime. You don't get like that proper summer
That's what it
downtime.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're spending
Wow.
half of it in build up to Christmas and then recovery, obviously, from the Christmas. and then
Yeah.
you're kind of half done. So it's
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
crazy because I don't know about over there, but over here, for a lot of us, Christmas prep starts in August because you start shopping, you start looking around, you start thinking. Even the mental fatigue of it starts around August. Even if you're not actively doing, you're like, it's coming, it's coming.
Yeah.
And so you're
And you're
starting
starting your lists. You're popping stuff on lists already, You're kind of like,
yes. And then you have Halloween, right? Is that a
yeah, that's in there as well. Yeah.
okay.
Thanks to the Americans, we didn't have it growing up, but now it's massive.
Really?
No, no kidding.
Yeah, well, not growing up in rural Queensland, we didn't, we knew about it, but no one did anything. I mean, they might have done it in the cities more, but now it's, massive.
Okay, so now it's everywhere.
Yeah,
And do you
thanks for
guys-
that, guys. Thank you.
Does everyone go crazy? Like here, the whole family's dressed up. People have like, parties. There's like, they're in their driveway, at least where it's warm, they're in their driveways and it's a whole celebration. Is it like that?
Yeah,
there?
it's a big thing. Although we don't, as a family, we decorate the house because my daughter's big into it, and they all go out trick or treating and everything. But we don't host a party. Some people have them, but
Okay.
But the dress ups and all that, and the sugar, all the stuff.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But you guys don't have Thanksgiving. I know that.
We don't have that. No.
Okay, so
That's
at least
true.
you don't have that. Okay,
No.
so
Do you have anything like that though, where there's some out of cycle holidays that we don't have that you have that are kind of
just about Australia.
national
big
holidays
shebang?
that shut things down?
We have in January, before the kids go back to school, the very controversial Australia Day, which is very controversial now because,
Why?
because obviously Australia was settled by the Brits, so it's like and so Australia Day is celebrating, the establishment of that culture. So the British arriving here and calling it Australia and having all of that, whereas obviously the Aboriginals were here for many, many years before that. So there's a rebranding of it by a lot of people saying it's Invasion Day. So,
Oh my goodness.
so it's all very controversial, but it still is. I don't know for how much longer. It will be on 26th of January. It's Australia Day, and everybody celebrates that, but not in the Thanksgiving sort of high maintenance way. It's more in the very Aussie, light up the barbecue, chuck some sausages on, invite some mates over, drink some beer, jump in the pool kind of way. So
Like our
it's
4th of July.
It's like 4th of July for us,
maybe,
Independence.
yes. Okay, so it's
Our-
like that.
Probably
Yeah.
Invasion
That's
Day
our
as well.
independence of from
Yes, maybe
Britain,
it's Invasion Day as well.
but
Yeah.
it's our invasion. Well, I think
That's more
no,
Thanksgiving.
Columbus Day is
Columbus
more,
Day,
yeah, which they've tried. That's like a dual celebrate. Okay, anyways, all right. So when you got to Woodford, you're still in elementary school. Did you participate in any sports or clubs or art or theater? Like, did you have any interests other than school during that time?
Yeah. Yeah. I think my parents plugged us in pretty quickly to the extracurricular. But it's a very Aussie thing. So I don't know about straight up. My parents were big tennis players. So I was obviously played outside of school, played tennis. I played netball. I did ballet. I did tap dancing, did Girl Guides or brownies at the time. So all the
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah. I don't know how my mum, with four of us, did all the things.
What was the second thing you said?
Netball?
Netball?
What's
Oh, yeah.
that?
Do you not have netball? That's
Wait,
so.
Mike, what is that?
What is it?
So it's that's hilarious. So it's massive here. Everybody, women, all the girls play it. So it's like a basketball concept, but you're not allowed to run with the ball. You're not allowed to even step with the ball. So as soon as you get the ball, you're static, and you throw it to the next person, and then you got to get it up there at your end, shoot a goal. So it's the most like basketball of any of the sports, but it's not. It's different rules. So you can't bounce it. You can't bounce it. You can't run with it. You can't do any of that. So you're basically throwing the ball from one to the other, shoot the goal.
And is the goal like a basketball hoop?
Yeah, without the backboard. So it's like a.
Oh, and is there any physical, like, do you run into each other or can you tackle each other or?
No, like you get penalties for that. So if you contact anyone, or if you're defending less than, I don't know what is, a meter out from someone, you'll get contact, and you got to stand beside. They get the ball. So it's very much, yeah. You get the ball, you throw it, you stop, can't move your feet, throw it to the next person. You have certain positions. There's 7 players. You got to play your positions. You can't go past X line if you're this, role. So it's, yeah, I don't know. It's huge. Every girl growing up plays netball. My daughter plays netball.
So it sounds like the defense on that is basically intercepting the ball, right? From passes. That's the That's so interesting. Now I'm gonna have to look that up after we're done. I want to
Look
see
it
what that's
up.
like. So
Yeah.
did your parents have all 4 of you in that many activities?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
How does that
amazing.
happen?
I don't know. That's amazing because that's unusual too. I mean, at least we were Gen X. We over here we were involved in stuff, but it was more like school sports and maybe rec stuff. But like somebody was giving you a ride, so it would have been like your mom giving like 10 of us a ride somewhere. It
But
wasn't.
this is the thing, right? You still rely on. I think about this all the time now because obviously I felt ashamed to become a stay-at-home mum because as a Gen Xer, that's like a failure. But I look at it now and I think that's kind of the glue because it was mums and being in the countryside and where we were, there were a lot of stay-at-home mums, but and if they worked, it was like they were picking strawberries or they were a receptionist at the doctor's or they, I don't really remember any power women role models, which was kind of this weird place that I sat as a high achiever thinking I had to be something, but I didn't know what. I felt the pressure that I had to be something, but I had no idea what that was.
No
It was
real
creating
role
this.
models per se.
I didn't know. Yeah, what could you be?
Yeah.
I don't know. So it was this kind of weird stress. But, so I think there were a lot of mums, shipping people around here, there, and everywhere. But also it wasn't that big. So like I'd finish school and I could walk up to the brownie hall. So I guess, there was that freedom. We were left to do that. I would get there. But because there were 4 of us, Mum had to choose 1 or 2 of us who was going the furthest. So she'd come and pick up and ship. But then the netball training was at the school because it's a country town. So nothing was, so that you just stay at school afterwards. So there was never anyone watching us really until I got picked up often. So you would finish school and you'd get to your thing because it was all, you just walk up to brownie hall, you walk up.
Yeah. So she had all 4 of you and stuff after school. So that gave her time too, more time where you guys are in activities before she had to grab all of you. That was smart. So as far as feeling that need, that high achieving need or that need to quote unquote be something or do something, do you remember how old you were when you first felt that pressure you put on yourself?
I don't know. you know when I felt it actually? Because when I moved up to Woodford, I was in grade 4, and I was saying before, I was always helping the teacher out I never thought anything about myself. I just kind of did. And I know in grade 3 I was the one who could spell the best, or I kind of knew I did that stuff. But it wasn't until grade 4 I spent that first year mainly in the classroom after school, helping, doing all this stuff. And I remember there was this other girl who was always a goodie in class. She always put her hand up. I never put my hand up much. I was always a bit modest, nervous. I don't know, whatever I was. And at the end of the year, there was the awards night. And I got this award for like the best, or I don't know what it was, all-rounder or best something in the class. And I remember being shocked, because I just didn't even have any concept in my head that I would get anything. I never thought of myself as that. And then I got that. And then I remember after that feeling like I think I started at that point and I don't know why exactly, but pegging my worth to that. I have to achieve, because I was always getting the highest result. I was achieving, but I don't think I noticed it so much until that point. And I don't know if it was a result of having been very new there, so I didn't have yet the social, I didn't have anything else yet to really fit myself into, maybe, I don't know, but I definitely remember at that age. So it probably started around then, but it wasn't as heavy until high school. So when I hit year 8, which was high school at that time, I definitely, and so probably year 7, the year before high school as well, year 7 and 8, I remember it very clearly because I was always good at things, and most years I got like the best sort of all-rounder kind of, it was this weird thing they had, and got lots of sort of acknowledgement in those ways of achievement. And at that time, there must have been a lot of stuff starting off with the kids at school where I was in the popular group, I ended up being school captain, all those annoying things that kind of corrupt your ability to be you, because they create this version that you have to be. And I remember a friend of mine, must have been grade 7, I was very good friends with her, and then I sort of started to hang out more with the popular group, And she had noticed it. She said to me one day after school, waiting for the bus, the half-hour wait till the bus came, and she just said, "Why are you always putting yourself down? Why are you pretending this and that?" And I'm like, I didn't know I'd done it. And it's very insightful for a girl who was probably 12 to say that to me. But it crystallized. I never did anything about it. It crystallized that thing in my head of me having to pretend I wasn't doing well or putting in effort to do anything, but equally that I felt this pressure to be the best because that was my currency. That's what kind of made me worthy, was doing best. So it started pretty young, I think. Like, I don't know how young, if that's young or not, but it felt like young.
Yeah, it sounds like you kind of anchored yourself in that producing is your worth, like achieving is your worth. And when you got that certificate, because maybe you were still figuring out your social structure at that time, so you didn't have a strong social circle to anchor yourself in. And so it started there
That was my
in
thing.
getting recognized, right? That became kind of your
Became your identity.
your identity. But then you succeeded at it and thrived. But to be in a popular girls group, there's always a queen bee. And she probably did not like anyone who was doing better than her, I would assume, was part of the problem within your group. Is that a correct assumption?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It was a weird thing because I always felt like I had to lie about my results. Absolutely. And there was a lot, it was kind of a group of, there's a few people in the group, and I guess there was one kind of queen bee who may not have identified as herself as the queen bee, but definitely she held sway in terms of things. But it's just all this stuff that started going on between everybody. I was judged for this. I was quite popular over the school, but so no one would know. And that was the horrible thing as well. You feel really lonely in this because you're in this group where you just feel awful all the time, which hit a point probably in grade 9 when I was 14. And I just felt, and I didn't know it. Like, yes, okay, they were probably saying these mean things about me, like, oh, I steal all their boyfriends, or because boys might have liked it. It was a small pond, so there wasn't much effort to be made to actually stand out. But and I did, and they would say things like, "Oh, you might do well at school, but no, you're not a good person," or like literally things like that, like really,
Yeah.
or pulling me
That-
down, or like a lot of things pulling me down. It wasn't about my results, but I felt like I had to hide that. And we have this thing in Australia called tall poppy syndrome. Don't know if you have it there.
No, but when I was reading your questionnaire, it made perfect sense because you spoke a little bit about it in your questionnaire. But please, for our listeners, explain what tall poppy syndrome is.
So it's this thing. So poppies, by their nature, biology, strangle the tall one. So they have this way of being where there'll be a tall poppy and they strangle it to pull it down. And so in Australia we say that. So anyone stands out, they get pulled down. And so,
Interesting.
that looking back, I guess it's a product of that. But I think I didn't see it at the time. You just think, oh my gosh, I'm not a very
But
good
yeah,
person. No, I'm a terrible person. I have to change myself. I have to whatever. But the thing that was always my winning strategy, like I knew I could do well. I got school captain. I was a fast runner. All the things I did okay. Like I had this kind of thing going on. So that became where I pegged my worth. But at the same time, I was ashamed of that as well. Like it's this dichotomy, right, where you're pulled between. And I think it's doubled down on because in our generation, because we'd broken out of the kitchen, we were like, you're supposed to, as a woman, achieve things. So I thought I've got this potential to be able to do that. But that's the thing that I feel I have to kind of dial down. But at the same time, I attach my worth to it. So it creates this horrible scenario. Like,
it's
how do you get around that?
Is
yeah.
there a double standard? Is it the same for guys and boys, or is this more the girls?
Over
Um,
where she grew up, you mean?
The tearing
it's
down,
real.
because I can relate to some of what you're saying around. I was pretty good at sports, and I became this identity of that became my identity, right? But if I was successful, it worked out well, as opposed to what you're describing. It you had to kind of hide your success, and I wonder if that's a girl versus boy thing, a male female
Well,
thing.
socially, like, did your
Mm.
friends, did they lift you up or look up to you because you were like the star quarterback or
Yeah,
whatever?
yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah, no, except
Mm.
some people, right? There's always the exceptions,
But
but not the rule. No.
in general. So, what
Yeah.
an internal, I mean, I'm sorry, those years are hard enough. And then to have that internal struggle, but it's such a great way of summing up what it was like to be a Gen X girl, because you're right. We were sold you can go to work now. You can have a career. You can do all the things. You can be the career woman. You can be the mom. You can be skinny. You can be beautiful. You can, get married and be the perfect woman, but don't shine too bright. You need to shush
Exactly.
yourself. You need to be quiet. You just need to do that with quiet dignity, and don't shine while you're doing it. But you better
Yeah.
do it. You
Yeah.
better
You're
good. You better
expected
be
to
good
do
for it.
it, but
Yeah.
you're vilified for it. Like I remember I started, so our school went to grade 10 and then I had to change schools. So when I got to, so grade 10, I turned 15. So then the next January I had to start at a different school for grade 11 and 12. And it was 30 minutes drive from the other school. So, but year 10 had been a big year because I was the school captain. I got the best all-rounder. I got Lions Youth of the Year. There's this thing called Lions Youth of the Year in the Lions. I don't know if you have Lions Club, which is like a charity.
Wait, we have a Lions
We
Club.
have Kiwanis. I
I
don't know
know
if we
there's
have,
a
is
Lions
there a
Club, but it
Lions
feels
Club?
more like it's a men's group, but I don't know.
Probably not in the same way.
Not the
Well, I
same.
think it might be maybe a men's. I don't know, but I don't even know what it generate where it comes from as such. What their main reason for being is as such, but
Like a
they're
charitable thing, I
involved in the
think.
community and yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so it's quite a thing, and they have this Youth of the Year, which I got that year in the region, or whatever it was. And so all these things. And I remember being in the newspaper for my swimming. There was a photo of me. I can still visualize it. There's a photo of me way ahead in the swimming. Like I was like in the pool. They're like wins the race, whatever, on the local. I mean, it's still small town stuff. It's not like any kind of Olympics, but at the
Right, right,
time.
right, right.
But then I remember going to this school, the new school, and the first day getting off the bus, and here's an anxiety sufferer because of all the stuff I'm trying to manage and not show and be, and no one
Yeah.
likes me because I'm this, but I'm, all the stuff. And I turn up first day, this girl sort of burly kind of girl. It's very, walks up. She goes, I know who you are. And just because you got all those things doesn't mean anyone's going to like you. Can you imagine? Like,
That
it's
is like
just
a movie.
horrible.
That is like a movie.
Yeah, it is a
It
scene
is.
from a movie.
That's a scene from a movie.
It was
Absolutely. What a
horrible.
nightmare. But did you did
Nightmare.
everyone have to move schools? Like, did your school only go to year 10 and then
Yeah.
your whole group moved to this? It wasn't just you. Okay. So
Well,
everyone
we
moved.
moved different schools because where our school was, so you could go half an hour further into the country, actually, which is where I went, stupidly, and then, or you could go like half an hour towards the city. So there was a few different options. So it wasn't like everybody went
Okay.
to the
So,
same school.
She was waiting for you.
yeah,
She was waiting for me.
Yeah.
she was. So when you were in 7 and 8 is when this really started, where you were feeling the pressure socially from your female peers, I assume, right? I highly doubt the
Yeah.
male peers were doing this, but the female peers are
Yeah.
trying to strangle you and bring you down. The
Yeah.
tall poppy
And
syndrome.
only the close group, only the,
Right.
yeah.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah.
And so, because there's no boundaries there, right? It's the people
Yeah.
that are more in arm's length honor boundaries because they haven't been
Yeah.
allowed access to you to that
Yeah.
degree. And then for 9 and 10, were you still within that same close group
Yeah.
for 9 and 10?
It was always only in the like I think in grade 9, yeah, it was always only the close group, and so I would end up befriending people outside of that close group because I'd be on the outer, no one would be talking to me, and in their world they probably didn't even notice it. Do you know what I mean? But because I internalized everything and I was highly anxious, okay, didn't know that at the time. I just constantly felt in this kind of panic all the time.
Yeah.
Kept achieving, kept doing this, and then I'd feel ashamed because they'd be saying, they'd be attacking me for things. Like I remember getting a new skin product and them going, oh, that'd be right, you'll get good skin, and then, like just these kind of like jives at me all the time. And
Yeah.
All subtle, probably
like,
too, right?
yeah. And so, and they, I don't even judge them because actually everyone's trying to survive, right? They're all in the same pot of crap and being teenagers and being girls and having same pressures and all the stuff. So I don't judge back then, but from my perspective where I was sitting, it just was awful. I felt so bad about myself, but equally had to keep achieving because that was the only currency I felt like I had. So
Right. It was almost like,
The trope.
in a way, probably felt like self-sabotage because the more you achieved, the more anxiety, that was more anxiety inducing. And the more you were worried about how your friends are going to treat you. But the achievement was your, I guess, kind of like your dopamine hit or your validation. But there was all the negatives that came with it. So it's almost like achievement was a good and a bad thing for you. Did you ever, and you, gosh, your nervous system was probably off the charts. You're in fight or flight.
off the charts.
Constantly. Did you, none of us, there mental illness and anxiety and depression, that wasn't a thing for Gen X, but did you ever talk to your mom about how you were feeling or what was going on with these girls?
No. Like I remember saying it, you know what? And this is the thing, like, because my parents were incredible. Like they were so supportive and there was no pressure coming from them. That was the thing. It was all an internal pressure because I am a perfectionist anyway. So I suppose once you know you can do something, you want to make sure you do that. So I always had that. But I still, even though that, I never really talked to them about it because I don't think there was a language for that. It wasn't, in our generation, we didn't really talk about feeling. I might say, oh, I'm nervous, and it'd be like, oh, because no one really thought about that very deeply. They didn't think you might be really suffering mentally. Anxiety wasn't even a word. Like I would never have heard that. And to think of seeing a psychologist would be so shameful because it only indicates you're in an asylum or something. Like it just wasn't a thing. So there was never a conversation. I remember saying, I had all this trouble with my friends because in year 9, I stopped eating. And I know my mum became, but see, she was friends with the mums of all these girls because it was like, so you have all this stuff going on and they were lovely people. They were actually really nice people. And as adults, I'm sure they're lovely people. But in this environment and because of my nervous system and because of the way, so probably as well, saying things to me might have had a million time worse impact than maybe saying it to someone else because I had so much, insecurity and stuff. So anything that was said just was like my self-worth was so low. So I think it damaged me more than it might damage somebody else.
Well,
But
and with girls like that, at least I'll say in America, once they know that about you, they don't stop. That's actually they're like, there's our victim. Once they see that,
Pounce.
they
yeah,
pounce. It's
yeah,
almost like all empathy is gone, all compassion, and it's like we that's our punching bag.
yeah.
So
But the
it's
thing
like,
is, I don't even know if they would know it because I was just very quiet and I would just move to someone else. Like I kind of, they mustn't, I don't know. They must have known, but I was a very good social chameleon as well. So I would
yeah.
very much know what to say and what not to say to provoke and not provoke. So
So
comes to, yeah,
so your identity was achievement, but then it sounds like you didn't have a foundation of anything else solid because you were a social chameleon as a coping mechanism to deal with because you were a victim of bullying. Um, so in a way, it's like how did you didn't have an identity yet because you were changing it depending on who you were hanging out with as a
yeah,
coping mechanism and
yeah,
probably disassociating to some degree, I would
yeah,
think, to deal with everything in school, which
yeah.
is a
I was
total Gen X
flex. I was total
coping mechanism.
flex. Whatever I had to be, I was. Like I became that. I kind of just, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
total identity crisis. You know, you don't know
And then,
who to be or,
right,
yeah,
When
you
did
be what you need to be.
when did you
exactly.
figure this out about yourself? Like probably not while in it, right? But at some point after you realized you were in this loop.
Oh, I don't think I figured it out for years, like till recently, to be honest. When I
Yeah.
probably hit motherhood, actually, I think is when
Yeah.
I figured it out. Because so yeah, I went to school, you know, grade 11 and 12, and then that was a ride because I got school captain at the next school. So then that was also a thing. And I became Miss Rugby League. Can you imagine?
My gosh. Well, wait,
I didn't
what's
realize we had such a superstar here.
No,
what's
it's
full
not. It's not like
no,
it's just the most tiny place in the world. But I don't know
Yeah.
what happened.
real quick, I just have to ask. When you said grade 9, you stopped eating as a coping mechanism. I also went through that. Did
Yeah.
you have an actual eating disorder? Did you have anorexia or bulimia, or what was
No,
it?
because I did it consciously because I
Right.
just was like I needed some. I don't know why. I just wanted to. Maybe it was a way of showing my mental disarray.
Yeah.
You know what I mean. I think that was kind of maybe a cry for some shit's really going down, and that was my flag. But I don't. You know, obviously it made my mom really worried, and they don't know what to do.
But
Like,
you couldn't put words to it. I know for me, that's a good point. Is a cry for help. But also it was the one thing I could control. I had
yeah,
so much chaos that I was like, okay, I can control this. And
yeah,
so that it
yeah,
gave me, it brought me peace because
yeah.
everything
Did
else,
yours become an eating disorder?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah. We actually are going to do an episode on it at some point, but it was a coping mechanism for different reasons.
yeah,
But that's why when you mentioned that, I think that a lot of Gen X girls at one point in their life, whether it became a full blown eating disorder or just they dabbled in it, I think if
yeah,
you ask most Gen X women, somebody had some experience with that during their adolescence or college years. I just think
yeah,
because also with society and
yeah,
we came from the thin diet culture. We
yeah,
didn't come from where curves were celebrated and all that stuff. So I think
yeah.
all of us, I think most female guests we've had on, when I've asked, everyone has had some sort of experience with whether it's dabbling in it or full blown eating disorder. And it's a
Yeah.
coping mechanism
Yeah,
for whatever's going on.
absolutely. Yeah, it is a coping
Yeah.
mechanism, but and also just to feel okay about yourself because, like, you think about those magazines we used to read, and they'd circle cellulite or the thigh gap, you know, this thing, and so that's what we were told we had to be, and so it's a coping mechanism to accept your body, to go, okay, well, if I don't eat, at least I'm trying, you know, I'm trying to be that. So even if it's not from the sort of mental health fallout of something else, it's from
Yeah.
that quest to be what you think you should be physically, which was
Yeah.
ridiculous. You know, I
And
just can picture those magazines. Oh my God.
if you're a high achiever, then you're like, well, I'm going to try to achieve this. You know, you're naturally going to try to
Absolutely.
achieve that. Oh, the
Yeah.
thigh gap. My body is not made. It's not,
I'm
no
not
matter.
made for.
No. I got really skinny when I was in the throes of my eating disorder, and I still didn't have my legs are not made to have a thigh gap. No matter how
It's
skinny I got. but like the fact that we were sold that was, you need a thigh gap.
No, how do you manage that? Like, if you've got, because I don't have the body either, because I was the same. Like when I got to grade 12, I remember getting thin as well and dressing for my formal, trying on a dress. And I'm like, Mom, like I've got a curve. I was thin. I was way too thin for what I should be because, and Mum saying to me, but that's just the shape of your body. And that felt like it was like sort of a criticism.
Yes.
That my shape of my body wasn't right because it was, which is crazy. It's so awful. It's awful.
That could be a whole nother episode. But
yeah.
So, real quick, can you explain what you won school captain? What is that? Is that like president of the school or government? Because we have student government. So we have like president, vice president, treasurer.
Oh, right. I don't think we're that organized about it. We just call it like school captain. So you vote for, it's 4 people. It's just a boy and a girl, school captain, boy school captain, girl school captain. And then you have the vice boy and girl school captain, vice captains. So, and then you have sport captains because you have 4 sport houses or however many sport houses, and then there's a captain of it. Now there's a million more. Like at my kids' school, there's like an environment captain, a friendship captain. I mean, everybody gets a flag, but back then it was like, just the school captain. So you were the one that you might have to talk at assembly, or you might have to represent the students' voice at something, or, I don't know, all sorts of things. Was it a vote?
People voted for you then to be this, okay.
Yeah,
so
it was a vote.
You had the target on your back, or as Brian calls it, ankle biters with our kids who've also achieved things.
I always tell our kids, as they do better, people are going to try to tear them down all the time.
And he calls
They're biting at their ankles.
Yeah, but so as much as you had that going on, you still, like you said, had floated around in all these social circles enough to connect with enough people. You were voted school captain every year.
Yeah. I don't know what goes on with that, but
no, it's like you were treading water in just chaos. To me,
and you don't take it. You don't not take it. Like I don't say no, I'm not going to be school captain because I know that being things is my currency. That's my worth. So you can't then extract yourself from that either. And I couldn't do badly at things because then I've got no worth. So even though it might make sense to think, okay, I'm going to just do badly, I would talk as if I was doing badly. Or I would say before an exam, everyone's there going, oh, I'm so nervous. And I'd be like, oh, so nervous. I've had to study or not. You have to enter that arena as someone that's in the same boat.
Right.
But, I often hit points in time where you wanted to back out, like pull out? Like I'll give you an example. I was pretty well known for sports in a small town too, so I can totally relate to what you're saying. I hit a point where I didn't want to play a sport at one point, and it was almost like I got talked into it. I was like, I really don't want to. I don't want to, but I got talked into playing. It was football. Did you ever go through that where you were like, you kind of wanted to pull back, but you kind of got pushed into it?
Yeah, I think so, but I don't think I was as smart as you about that. Maybe I wasn't as insightful.
I wound up playing. I wound up playing.
Huh? Oh, you played, yeah.
Playing. Yeah.
But at least you had the conversation with yourself. Like I don't think I had the feeling, like I had that intense I mean, I used to go to the sick room all the time with stomach aches. I just felt sick constantly, and like constantly, I felt sick every day. I woke up, I just felt panicked. That's just how I existed, and it became normal. And it's taken until these older years to go, okay, that's not normal. How do I dial down that feeling? Because even getting rid of that feeling eventually became scary because that's all I knew was to feel like that.
And because your cortisol is off the charts, because your nervous system is totally dysregulated and your body gets addicted to that cortisol hit.
Yep.
People don't realize that is when you are completely dysregulated and you are surviving and treading water barely, your cortisol is off the charts, and it's almost physiologically your body then adjusts to that. And so as you become regulated and slow down, downshift, I call it, heal, your cortisol comes down. Your body doesn't know what to do with it.
We had a guest on that
scary.
talked
about that. Yeah. It's scary. And then your body becoming healthy is more uncomfortable than staying in the dysregulated
more of a shock to your system, really.
Yeah, because it feels unsafe, because that's all you've ever known. And so all of a sudden you feel unsafe to be, Because when you're on high alert all the time, being on high alert, even though it's really unhealthy, you feel like you're doing something to look out for yourself. So you're kind of like this. And
Yes.
then you know, to not be like that, you think, oh, well, I'm not being so vigilant. That's scary. Something's going to happen. And so you
Yes.
keep the level, which is
Yes.
terrible. So
I
yeah, I
think
lived like that.
I think so many Gen Xers grew up like that. And even it's funny because you came from a very healthy, well-adjusted upbringing. So it isn't just from your upbringing. It's I think part of it is that there was no outlet to put words to it. Because what
Yeah.
a freeing experience for our kids that they can identify what they're feeling. I'm having social anxiety. I'm having anxiety. I feel depressed. That alone, being able to identify and voice it removes so much of that panic
Yeah.
inside of you. And
Yeah.
I think for Gen X kids, if we would have just obviously no one knew, but if we would have had those tools, that could have helped us
Yeah.
so much. And I think that's why we were so dysregulated and how you said on high alert. So many
High
of us were,
alert.
yeah.
Yeah, and even if we'd had the ability to speak about it somehow, there would be no receptacle for that because the adult population had no idea how to deal with that, you know? So at least now our kids can speak to us. Like my daughter suffers anxiety with the perfectionist exams, you know, but she can talk about that. I can understand it and I can know how to help her and have a conversation about it and dial it down, you know, whereas we had none of that. So it just
Yeah.
sits there, dialing up all the time. And it's so disabling. It's horrible.
Well, what's interesting
Yeah.
is even other kids can talk about anxiety, so they can relate to maybe what your daughter's going through and be
Yeah.
a little bit easier. Give her some
Yep.
grace,
They support
right?
each
Yeah.
in general. They support each. It's very accepted. It's
The
very
kids
accepted
that
on
were
social media.
like the kids
Yeah.
that were terrible to you, even if they had no concept, to your point, you said it earlier, right? They didn't know because they had no words for their own behavior and the fact that I'm
Yeah.
being a shitty person because I have my own problems and I
Yeah.
have no way to discuss them and work it out. So I'm just going to behave a certain way.
So
Yeah.
everything
And this
piles on
whole
top of
thing,
each other,
yeah,
Yeah.
you know,
100%.
because
Yeah.
they also, like, no one intentionally hurts anyone, right? Everyone just wants to feel better. And so if you're feeling crap, you put some
Yeah.
crap out there to sort of get some kind of equilibrium within you. So, yeah, but if they'd had the language, they'd be going,
Yeah.
or the insight or the ability to sit and workshop it or whatever, you know, they'd be like, oh, yeah, I don't feel good enough. So I actually want to say something bad to you so you don't feel good enough. But if they could identify that, you break the pattern.
Well, yeah, because it was so much projection. Well, you've done that with, I think a lot of us Gen Xers as parents have attempted to do that, break the generational cycle. And not that it was passed down from your parents. It's almost, some of us
It's
are breaking
societal.
the generational cycle
Yeah.
from what we
Yeah.
went through as children, but some are breaking it from society,
Yeah.
a societal, we're as a generation, as parents, we're trying to break that societal issue that
Yeah.
we suffered. So this
Yeah.
generation of Gen Z and Gen Alpha doesn't have
Yeah.
to go through that. So I think most of us have tried to do that. Like in your relationship with your daughter is just one example of that. So
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just picturing you in this panic attack, basically panic attack state. It feels like, um, all the way through, this went through all the way through year 12, like
Yeah.
your whole, from like 7 to 12. So you're in
Yeah.
this high alert state and you've done all these
Yeah.
different coping mechanisms, still achieving. Um, did it end up busting at some point? Was there a moment where it had a climax and everything kind of fell apart?
Yeah. Well, it fell apart, but then it very quickly didn't, you know, all the pieces were
Yeah.
reassembled very quick, you know. But because there's
Can't
no
have
space
that.
to fall
No, no,
apart. There's no,
no.
how do you fall apart, you know? And especially, yeah, it's not allowed.
So true.
It's so true. Like I had, so grade, yeah, I don't know. I had the youth of the year thing. I don't know what it was for. So I think this happened maybe in grade 12. So I lived in this state constantly where I was panicked all the time about everything, but still trying to do well. Although grade 11, I didn't do well academically. I let it slide. I think I just was like, I don't know. I can't remember my mindset. Maybe I was just whatever. But then obviously picked it back up for grade 12. I was school captain. I was on the debating team. See, I don't know. I threw myself into these things because it was like that was my only currency. So I kept doing and kept doing. completely panicked. Like, it's like you do it even though you're shaking. You're like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it, you know? And so I did it. And then I had to do this speech. It must have been the Lions Club. And it was like for, I don't know whether it was for the youth of, I think it was the youth of the year. I was representing, because I got it in grade 10, so it might have been in grade 11. I don't know. Two different regions. There was one guy from our school, the other vice captain, and then me. He was it for another region and I was it for this region. And so we were at this event where we had to speak about something. He was speaking about genetics. So I have no idea what I was speaking about because he came from, he had a brother who was doing engineering in the States. His father was a school principal. So his world was slightly different. So he had a different lens to process things and to access things. And I don't know what mine was about. I have no idea because I don't know that I knew anything. But anyway, had to do this speech. So I was probably already panicked about the content of my.
Can you remember what it was?
I have no, I've tried to remember that and I have no idea what I spoke about. I remember what he spoke about because this is the thing. I think I always sat so far outside of myself. I lost absolute touch with what I thought, who I was, what I knew about, internally that I felt. So I had no attachment to that. So I started to live this existence, which was a complete reaction to everything else, what everybody else thought, what everybody else, so I think that's why I don't remember anything about mine, but very much remember his, because what I would have been thinking was, oh my God, look how smart he is. Look how much he's, that's where I would have sat. And then my anxiety comes up because then I'm like, but my only currency is being smart, but I'm clearly not smart because look at him. He's got all that, so then the anxiety gets worse. It's like my only currency, but I feel like that's not even real because, so anyway, boiling pot. And I remember
like an existential crisis literally during this moment of before you have to give this speech, it sounds like.
Yeah, it was horrible. Like, and I'd already been in bits about it, didn't want to do it, but there was no thought about not doing it. Like, because that's failure as well. That's not, I don't know. It's like a stupid paradox
You're
of
like
everything.
on autopilot. You're just going. You're on
just do it.
Grinding.
Yeah.
GenX,
You
the
just
GenX
go
grind.
GenX, right? You're just a grinder. You get it done. You do it. There's no question of not doing it, regardless of the complete collapse internally. You're doing it. And so I did it and broke down in tears. I stood on the stage and I couldn't speak. It was a mess. I just remember shaking and then, so that moment, and I don't even know if I ended up pulling myself together and getting through the speech. I can't remember what happened after that. All I remember is sitting in the car on the way home, just crying. So I completely broke, but do not remember that changing anything. All I remember then, back to school, I probably didn't do any more speeches. I remember doing the end of year speech as a grade 12 school captain and stuff, so I must have got up there. But from that moment on, what I do remember is I shook a lot. I remember shaking if I had to do something. So it clearly changed something, but I kept walking the walk. I kept trying to push and be what I needed to be. And I think the fallout started after school, where I then didn't want to, I was supposed to go to university, obviously. And I chose to study social science. Like everything became uncertain because I was like, there was always this push-pull between feeling like I had to do something that conventionally showed success, achievement, whatever, because that's kind of my currency, between the internal me that actually was searching for so much more, like purpose, value, stuff that I couldn't probably articulate back then. And I remember choosing social sciences at university thinking, okay, well, that feels purposeful. Like I was sort of always on a journey then, I spent end of year 12, that probably between finishing year 12 and university starting, trying drugs, doing all the stuff, becoming a complete mess, drinking, all the things, and being a nightmare to my parents, absolute nightmare. Because I was like, and then I got into Bob Marley and music, I became an environmentalist, like all the stuff, finding meaning, because that was the expected. Like, so I had these two worlds that were going on within me. So I applied for uni, got into social. Can you relate to that? Were you the same?
I can totally relate. I became a deadhead and grew my hair out, had long hair, and stopped playing sports. I wanted nothing to do with sports. Started mountain biking, mountain climbing, found Bob Marley, smoking weed, drinking, right? The whole thing, Grateful Dead. And yeah.
Well, you were partying though more, I think, earlier in high school because you said that sounds like more year 12 is when you
Yeah, no, I mean,
started.
you're
You were,
partying,
yeah.
but then I think what you're describing, I can relate to uh, trying to leave it behind and become a new person and find who you kind of really are, or just leaving that behind and
Yeah.
trying something else, I think.
Well, it sounds like,
Because you were in a fishbowl. What I mean by that is, and maybe that makes sense, but your world was very small. I guarantee you, if you went to the pharmacy or the grocery store, everybody knew who you were, probably, right? Or at least you felt
Yeah.
that way.
Oh no,
Yeah,
everybody did know. It's tiny.
anonymous at all inside of your little world there.
No one was anonymous. Yeah, everybody knew everybody. So,
Yeah,
and
and
I'm
it was,
picturing
yeah,
from year 7 to that moment you did that speech, all those years you're holding it together, you're going through the motions, you're grinding, you're having this anxiety that's just ravaging your body, your mind, your emotions. And then that speech where you fell apart, but it was almost like a crack in the system where there was room then for a shift, because it sounds like that's where things started to kind of shift. You were shaking, and you had some post-traumatic stress, it sounds like. And then you still gave your speech, it sounds like, at graduation, but you were easing into this new, Bob Marley, trying drugs, being rebellious with your parents. Sounds like that speech was that pivotal moment of things are going to start shifting a little bit.
yeah.
Would you say that's kind of accurate?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Because I was looking for something else, something that actually, I didn't know it at the time, but yeah, you're searching
Yeah.
for meaning. I'm trying everything else. I became vegetarian, all the stuff.
it
Wearing
too.
my mum's clothes from the
Yeah.
60s,
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too.
going to folk festivals, you start to go, okay, because because also I think that's the thing. I've always been a seeker anyway. Like my parents were in the church growing up. My dad very much so, and we were brought up to go every Sunday and all of this sort of stuff. And I actually, even though I don't identify as Christian now, as I'm very, very spiritual now, but I always loved speaking to. There was a guy who was like one of the lay ministers, I think, at our local church, and he used to go work in Papua New Guinea, and I loved speaking to him because he had this purpose. He was helping people. Like there was this other part of me which I'd never thought about, and I think that's what came out. It's like there's something I know that I connect with that's not achieving or whatever for the sake of it. And it was exploring that a bit too, because that's why it was the vegetarianism, the environmentalism, all this sort of stuff. And I noticed with him, he was helping these people. I think it was Papua New Guinea. He worked as a missionary, and in these places, and it really resonated. And so I studied social sciences because I thought, oh, maybe that's my thing. I want to help people. I want to do something. And so I went to do that. But I got a call from the school principal. Can you imagine? From I think the school I went to in grade 10, saying, "What are you doing? I've heard you got into social sciences." You should be studying maths and science. What are you doing at that university? And so I quit the course.
Wait, what year 10 in university or in high school?
No, he was my principal in year 10 in high school, but called me when I got into university in like years later.
So 2
After
years
school.
later, she goes through 11 and 12, graduates, goes to university.
Do you guys go to university right after graduation from
Yeah.
senior
Yeah,
year?
so that's the
Okay, just like we do. Okay,
We
so
go college.
yeah, so you went to university freshman and sophomore year in the social sciences, and your principal from your high school called you?
Yeah, when I got into it and was like, what it But this is the thing, I had the same thing in grade 9. I wanted to study. I didn't know what I wanted. I was always a bit, because I was living this external world, right? Reaction to everything, living as a reaction rather than. And I remember I chose a subject, metalwork, right? I wasn't allowed to do it. I had to do history because they're like, no, you're too smart to do metalwork. And so
And
it
is
was the same thing.
university or high
No, at
school?
ninth
This was
grade.
in high school. So this happened in 9th grade, but then it
Metalwork.
feels like the same thing kind of. I had
Yeah,
this phone call about,
yeah.
and to be honest, I don't know that social sciences was the thing. It's just that I'd chosen it because I was like, so he's like, you got to do something else, like engineering or this or that. And I'm like, okay, so I quit and I went to do engineering. I chose environmental engineering because I felt, oh, well, at least that's purpose. I was sort of trying to marry everything up all the time, like how I kind of felt with what I thought I should, it was this weird paradox of things and pulling in different directions and all that sort of stuff. So the journey kind of continued, which is sort of, so I went through that time of exploring and
Where did you go to where did you go to university?
Brisbane.
Okay, so why did he have access to even call you? That's weird.
She grew up in a small world.
I know, it was a small world. One of my friends was, someone was chatting to him. I don't know.
He's gonna save her.
That's such our generation, though, because never would we ever let anyone with our kids like the principal.
That's not true.
I would never give it.
I can relate. If I remember going back.
No, with our kids, we would never give their phone number.
Not at all.
You know what I mean? Like, I would never let the high school principal call my 25-year-old daughter, even now. You know what I mean? I'd be like,
but back then,
it was like,
it's not a big deal. No, like have a chat. She'd probably love the advice. Like you know.
Yeah.
And that's a valid thought, I guess, when you don't know.
Yeah.
Actually, it's an interesting thought.
Yeah, but no one would have thought about that. That's actually not appropriate.
But I'm curious. So, I have a feeling I know the answer, but our parents would have thought of, oh, that's the principal. They're an authority figure. I should.
They know better.
They know better. I bet Australia's like that, and even a little more dialed up than it is here, right?
Yeah, I think, well, at that time, for sure. I think it's questioned a bit now. I see my friends and I talking about the teachers and like, oh my God, we're a different generation, but definitely back then, I mean, they were the school principal. They know what they're talking about. That it's an honor if they want to give advice because they care enough. It's an honor. So of course.
You would have viewed that as, okay, I'm going to listen to him because this is amazing. He took the time out to call me and talk to me about my future. He must be right. So then you just switch gears into engineering, environmental engineering.
Environmental engineering,
Save the barrier reef.
Yeah, exactly.
To save the reef, which is what my daughter wants to do. So that's bizarre. But but it wasn't as linear as that, really, I don't think. It wasn't as neat as that, I don't think. Because I was an easy target. Because I was studying this. I was taking random subjects. Like I was taking human resources and things that, and I had zero confidence in myself. So the thought of being a counselor for someone or a therapist, I was scared of that. And even when I was an engineer, when I was studying engineering, I didn't graduate, by the way, I was studying engineering. I remember thinking that even though I did well at it and I, helped other students, I had this, I could never be an engineer because how can I make decisions? How can I tell people how this is to be built? I always had that within me. So it was a product, it was going to be the result. I was going to leave social science easily. If I was told that, I was like, okay, well, I've got no idea. So I had very little internal knowledge or confidence or guidance, so I ping-ponged around because of that. I could easily just be told, no, that's not right.
Right. And it's almost like as high achieving as you were, and as much as you probably knew theoretically, if you think about it, you had constant imposter syndrome.
Yes.
Like, were you ever, no matter what you achieved, you probably still always felt imposter syndrome with every level up.
Yep.
It probably didn't
100%.
matter.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%. Everything. I never, I was always surprised, even from that little girl as a 9-year-old, getting that award in grade 4, totally surprised that was given to me. I was like, what? It was so weird. And so always. And even, I was producing documentaries by the time I moved to London when I was 30. And I started making documentaries and I moved up quickly because I was older. I think I was 20. No, I was younger. I was 28, I think, when I started. But anyway, moved up quickly. But even then, even though, because I'd lived in LA, I had a lot of access to people and things so that when we had to cover a topic, we did one on movies. So I just had people that could give me refilming locations or get access to people. And everyone's like, this is amazing. So I kind of knew what I was doing. I moved up quickly and had confidence in my ability to kind of do things. But still, I made sure I worked in a small company and I got to the point where I worked with the owner of the company. He was the director and I was the producer. This is after I'd sort of been through a few levels. And never once did I make a decision. I made sure that that he did all the creative. So I could get access, I could get access to people at the Kremlin. I got access to science that was being done by these scientist out in Florida, and anything I could do. And I got access, got all the interviews, got all the information, but I'm like, I don't want, why would I know how to put together a documentary? Okay, I can do. So that lasted forever. That's just
Yeah.
was how I was. It's horrible. It's
Yeah,
horrible.
that was a constant. So when you went into environmental engineering, you said you didn't graduate. How long did you study that for?
So I did 2 years, and then I went to Canada for almost a year and did a working holiday. I was tarring the roads I worked in a road gang. So I did like working holiday and earned money doing all kinds of stuff. I worked for Sears for a while. I had a Canadian boyfriend at the time who I met through university. So we took a year out and went. So we did 2 years, took a year out, went there, went down through Mexico, just traveled, and it was very freeing. So I was just, it was me in a backpack. We were spending $100 a week. That was it. Living on beaches and it was awesome.
What year was that?
And then
You remember?
97, 1997.
You're a couple of years younger than us.
Okay,
yeah.
so you did your freshman and sophomore year in college and then left.
So I did 2 years. Yeah. So we don't call them freshman, sophomore. Yeah, 2 years.
2
and then
years.
left.
What is the year one? What is the normal college time frame? Is it 4 years?
That degree was 4 years, yeah. But
Okay,
it depends what you do. I think the social sciences would be 3 years, but then if you want to be a psychologist, you would do then more, you'd go into specializing in that, and you'd do more years. So it kind of depends what you study. But engineering was 4 years and you're out. So
okay. So you did university for 2 years, and then you had this boyfriend, an Australian boyfriend?
Australian, but his dad was Canadian. So he had a Canadian passport. And so anyway, he was going to Canada, and I think he did 6 months at a Canadian university, like a sort of exchange. So he had left before me, and then I came over, and then we traveled and worked together.
How did that go over with your family, that you were leaving school and going to go to Canada?
Well, don't know. They were always supportive. Do you know what I mean?
Good.
And
There was no
also,
big deal?
no, and they weren't ever pushy. They wanted us to be happy. They wanted us to do well, obviously. But I don't. There was never any expectation in that sense. So there was never a disappointment. I don't know. Maybe they secretly did, but they would never tell me
No,
that.
but that's wonderful.
I think they were more scared because I'm over in this country, because they'd never traveled, and I remember being in Mexico. I went into Guatemala as well, and I actually ended up getting hepatitis. I came home and had hepatitis A, and
Oh my gosh.
my parents, I got really sick and all the stuff, and my parents, that freaks them out because they'd never traveled. So there was more those things. I think they were worried, like, oh my gosh, she's going to die, more than, oh, she's not at college. Do you know? It wasn't, that wasn't the pressure.
Though, because if you think about it, what they knew of you is you were this high achieving student, right? And you were the school captain and you were all the things. And then 2 years into college, you're like, actually, I'm going to go travel now. And so for a lot of parents, that'd be like, wait, what? What are you talking about? Like, because it's such a veer off of the normal path. So what a testament to them that they still, I'm sure inside, like you're saying, they were scared and probably like, what's going on? But they still were supportive of you. And that's really
Always
cool.
supportive, always.
That's really
But I'm
cool.
sure they were freaked out, and I'm sure they had those moments of what the hell. Because I think as well, they probably were a bit scared to say anything, because I was quite rebellious in end of year 12. Not rebellious, I was just difficult. I think I was confused, and I was doing all sorts of things. So I guess they knew that. And so to say to me, no, they know I would just do it anyway, because I ended up being like that. I just kept doing stuff. And so, but now looking back, yeah, I mean, it would have been scary. I was in Israel when the second Intifada started in 2000, and we were getting bombed from Lebanon in the kibbutz. And my parents would have been so scared. They knew that. The Australian government was contacting us, telling us to get out. And I'm like, no, I had an Israeli boyfriend at the time. And I'm like, no, with the Israelis, it's fine. We've got our bomb shelter. We've got our bomb bags. Like, we're good.
Oh my gosh.
Can you imagine? Like, as a
You were in Israel when that was going on?
That's crazy.
in 2000, yeah.
Wait, so we
Okay.
went from
Yeah, I was
97.
picturing-
She's
Sorry.
traveled. Yeah. So wait, how long did you travel through Canada and Mexico?
Well, I have
Okay.
a different question. Which part of Canada did you go
Oh, yeah,
to?
yeah,
And then
yeah,
what was
yeah.
your route down to Mexico?
Yeah, so
Not the
I
exact
flew
one,
in. Okay, I flew into Saskatchewan. So into Saskatoon. So I left Australia. It was summer, so I don't know, it was January. So it was like 40 degrees when I got on the plane, and I landed, it was minus 40 degrees. So that was the first time I'd seen snow, the first time, anything.
Yeah.
So, because I grew up in Queens, I hadn't even left the state, but this was like, huge. And I was,
That's amazing.
Would that be British Columbia? So like the west coast of Canada?
no, it's kind of it's in the center, but sort of east of center, like right in the middle. Yeah,
so
right in the
above like
middle.
Montana or Michigan.
Above, I think Montana's a bit further west, but yeah, kind of a bit further east, but yeah, in the middle.
Canada cold is different than even like
oh my God,
America cold. It's cold.
It was so cold. Well, minus 40 was on the thing. Is not. I mean, I filmed in Russia as well in minus 40, so I can't. And I was probably more prepared for it then because I was already older. But when I landed from Queensland, I was probably wearing, flip flops. I don't know. I was like, no idea.
How old were you?
20. I was 20. Yeah.
Well, she's talking Celsius too, I think, right?
Yeah.
Celsius, Celsius.
So 40 Celsius is pretty nice.
Yeah. So you're 20, never left Queensland.
I left once. I went on a trip to Vanuatu when I was 18 with my friends. Just a little holiday, but that was it. And I got a passport for that. But other than that, I left when I was 20 and I flew to
Canada. And you met up with this boyfriend.
Yep. So he was in Saskatoon. And so we bought a car. So I had 400 Australian dollars in my pocket. That was it. But it was, he had a place to stay. He was staying with his brother. So we could stay there initially. And we bought this car. He must have bought the car because I can't have spent my $400 on the car. I'm not sure. But we drove to Calgary. So we drove west, went to Calgary. As soon as we got to Calgary, I got a job. Like, because we were grafters, right? Like in GenX, I was always like, before I left, I was working jobs. At uni, I was working jobs. Like I was used to just saying, okay, save money, get money. You can do it, And so, I got a job. As soon as we got to Calgary, we lived in this basement and got a basement apartment. Got a job with Sears, the department store in the delivery section. So I was working straight away and it was just all about earning money. And so we'd go to the Rockies for the weekends and stuff. But after a little bit, we realized we're not going to make enough money to travel how we want to travel if we stay here and pay rent and all the stuff. So that's when we got the job with the Road Gang, because then we could stay in motels with them. They'd pay, the company paid. And so we traveled all around Alberta and Grand Prairie and, by tarring roads. So we were just, filling the cracks with tar and then squeegeeing it over and moving on. So we walked miles and miles a day. So we did this for a few months and then saved up enough to then go. And I think we did like a 4-month trip. So we drove from straight down the Rocky Mountains. So we're from Banff, I think it was. We started in Banff, down through Jasper. It was beautiful. And went right down to Salt Lake City. So straight down and then straight across Salt Lake Desert to San Francisco. So it's like in this car that we'd bought in Saskatchewan. Huh?
Down through Montana, probably Wyoming.
National Park.
Yeah.
Through there in Wyoming, the Grand Tetons.
Yellowstone. So we went through Montana, Yellowstone National Park, went to all of that, Salt Lake City, across Salt Lake Desert, straight to San Francisco, then down to LA. And then in LA, we left our car with a friend of his parents or someone. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how this car made it. We bought it at an auction for so cheap in Saskatchewan. Anyway, we made it. And then we got a bus from LA right down through Mexico across to Tulum. I don't know if you know, in the Yucatan Peninsula. And Tulum at that time was amazing. It was nothing there. I see now in the pictures there's hotels and all sorts of things. But at the time, there were just a few little huts, like stick huts with the grass and with a hammock. And I slept on a hammock. It was amazing. And so we spent 3 months just backpacking around Mexico, went into Guatemala and up all around. I got sick in Mexico, went to hospital in Mexico, but we were spending $100 a week. That was our budget from the time we left. So I don't know how we did that. I mean, now it seems crazy, but
that's amazing. And did you ever, as a woman, because we drove around the country around that time, around 93, but we didn't leave. And then we did Canada for our honeymoon, but we didn't ever do Mexico and down in that area back then, did you ever feel an issue with safety as a woman, or was it pretty safe at that time?
Do you know what? I didn't, but I don't know if I was just stupid. What I don't know. Because I was always really switched on, but I just never felt, I don't know, like even when I was in Morocco, like I think of things now that I did, and in Turkey, getting a massage by a man, like naked, like in this hammam. And I don't know, I think now the things I did, I slept on the beach in Spain on my own, me and my backpack and a jug of
Oh my
sangria.
goodness.
But
Wow.
I never did. And I think that's ridiculous. But I just always trusted I'd be fine. So
You know what?
Your
I
hippie
don't
face.
know.
Yeah, no, ignorance is bliss. I mean, honestly, because
I don't
that's
know.
that's part of that Gen X too, I think. It's just because when we drove around the country, you had a ponytail, we had hippie stickers, and I remember your parents being like, "Be careful in the South," and we were like, "Why? Like, what is the big deal?" But because it
Yeah.
never occurred, you know. But
Because
you were also,
you get things done, right? You get things done, things are
yeah,
possible, things are,
yeah,
and so you
You
just go
figure it
into
out.
it. Figure
yeah,
Yeah,
it
you
out.
figure it out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was our motto as well. It'd be like, oh, we'll
Yeah.
figure it out. Like, you know, even
yeah,
you hit visa issues, you hit this, you're like, we were shot at in Guatemala, this bus we were in, you know, but it still didn't worry me. I was like, no, that'll be fine because, you know, we'll get there and we'll get, you know, but I don't
It won't
know.
happen again. We got by. It won't happen
We
yeah.
again.
survived it. We're good.
Yeah.
Like, I think
Keep
that is a
going.
very much a Gen X thing. You just survive it and you're good and you keep going. Like, you're not, you know, because we
Yeah.
weren't allowed to dive into anxiety or our emotions. You didn't really get worried about it. You're just like, okay, right, next thing, next
Yeah.
thing. Like, I can do it.
Yes. Yes. And
Like
in
when
those
we did
situations, I mean, that's where it pays off.
and we
In
didn't
those
have a
situations.
plan when we drove around the country. We're just like, we're just gonna get up and we're gonna try to get kind of here.
Yeah.
And if we
Yeah.
get there, that's cool. And if not, we'll stop somewhere.
Yeah.
We'll
No,
figure it out.
it was great. So you got sick in Guatemala, so then did that force you to have to go home?
No. So I got sick. I was very sick, like for 3 days, but just didn't tell anyone. My boyfriend helped me. Some local lady told me to eat the lady who worked at the hostel, eat papaya seeds. And then we just came back into Mexico as planned, you know, and went to Zipolite. We were there and I got sick again and I was eating the papaya seed. But then by the time we got to, I can't remember, it was north of Zipolite. We went to somewhere. Anyway, I had to go to hospital because I couldn't breathe. So I went
Okay.
into hospital and was there because they were getting me asthma stuff and all this stuff. And then beside me, a baby died beside me. So this mother, so it was in this hospital and I was sick and this mother came in with this baby that was blue. I guess it was cot death. I don't know. It was just like, oh my God. So
And this is in Mexico?
this was in Mexico. Yeah. Because I was like in the emergency, you know, I had this, I was in this room
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
just
yeah.
remember being there. So I was in a hospital then and that, you know, it's just like, and then it was this kind of thing as well, like, because this woman's undergoing grief and the doctor's there. I said, look, I'm fine. I don't need anything. Because like grief of like seeing the horror
Yeah.
of seeing that
Trauma.
happen and the grief of that
Trauma.
woman.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I was just like, no, I'm fine. So I just took a script and I kind of left. So I didn't stay in there and I got I got some meds and I was actually ended up fine because I was an asthmatic as a kid. I had bad asthma. So I kind of
Okay.
just think I'd had pneumonia. Like I think it had come into pneumonia and anyway, so I got the meds and I was actually fine. I didn't stay in hospital because that happened and I was like, I'm fine actually. I can deal. So I took my meds and left and got out of hospital, but then I ended up so I just stayed. Yeah, and then we went back up through the States, went back up to Canada. Like it didn't deter me. I kept going. But then when I got home, because my brother was getting married, so I had to fly home in October, I had hepatitis. I got sick and I'm like, so
Wow.
I'd caught hepatitis somewhere.
Okay, so you don't know where.
I guess it's in Mexico. We were eating from all the roadside stuff and, you know, all the
Okay.
things. So I'm guessing it was there. Like, don't know. Maybe it was in
And
the
then
States, but I doubt
did
it.
you
I doubt it.
stay? Did you stay at home then because you were sick? Or did
So I
you
got
only stay?
home. Yeah, like I'd been away for, I don't know.
Okay, so when you went back for your brother's wedding and you had hepatitis A, did you stay home for a while or did you kind of just get better and then join the boyfriend again?
So no, I stayed home because I thought, because this was the thing, right? Because even though I had this drive to find myself or to I don't know, I want to find purpose, find something else. I
Yeah.
was always hamstrung by this constant thought of, I need to do something. I need to do something real. I need to achieve something valid and something that's, conventionally recognized and whatever. So
Right.
that was a constant, which I regret now because it stopped me from being in the moment a lot of the time. You're kind of always like, oh, okay. Even though so I lived this kind of double way, like, or I kept doing things to pursue what I would find meaningful, but I also was constantly had this kind of, pull towards, a conventional marker. What should I do? So I went back to uni. I went back into engineering because I was originally going to take a year out and then go back. So I thought, well, I'll go back in the January. And I started working in a cafe because I always worked and did uni. So I just went back into that same scenario. But I think I got halfway through third year and I just couldn't do it. I remember, yeah, I couldn't work out. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't see I went to do work experience and I couldn't see myself as an engineer. I'm just like, even though it's environment. So, but I didn't know what else, because I didn't have any modeling of that. Like, I don't know. Like, even the school didn't tell me what I should be or how I should use that because where I grew up, I didn't really have people doing other than what was done in the area, sort of blue collar workers and stay-at-home moms and all that, which was fine. But if you want to work at the school or you want to be a conventional thing, like a lawyer or a doctor, they're obviously, paths but I didn't know paths that might actually resonate with me. I didn't know so many things. So I don't know, I just left. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to leave. So I left and I worked just, I don't know, various jobs just to save up again. And then then I got a job in a hotel, 5-star hotel. I got a job at the Sheraton. And so I did that. I don't know, I must have been in Australia all up 2 years in the end. After I came back.
At home? Were you, during all this time, were you living at home?
No, so I moved out of home at 17 when I first went to uni, and then I didn't. So when I came back for the hepatitis, I obviously stayed at home, but then I moved down to Brisbane again as soon as I was better and got a job and went back to uni, found a flat, all the stuff, and lived there. And then I worked. I don't know how long for, but I reckon I was in Australia. I left in 2000 again. So I think I got back 98, like end of 97, I got back and then was here 98, 99, worked in hotels in the end. So I worked at the Sheraton, I was in the front office and I got a job as the front office supervisor. And it could have been, this could be a career path. And I was thinking, even I could go into hotels and then create an environmental hotel chain. Or, I was always trying to find the purpose, like what's the bigger picture? What do I care about? The
meaning.
But yeah, the meaning, I was always like, okay, so it had to be something, but anyway, so then I left again. So it hit 2000. I must have left, I don't even know when I left, in 2000 sometime, beginning of 2000, maybe February, I don't know when. And I was like, okay, I might move to Sydney and become a naturopath. Like in my mind, I was like, I care about health. I care about the nature. I care about, so in my head, I thought, maybe, I don't know. I had no idea, but I was going to do something. I was going to go to study again because it was always had to do something that made sense.
Right.
But I'll go first for 3 months. So I went to Thailand, spent a month in Thailand with a friend, and then I went to Morocco for a month, drove around Morocco with another friend, and then I ended up in Europe, and I was going to travel from Spain to Greece overland. So I was going to go across Corsica. I wanted to hike across Corsica. So I was on my own, and I just kind of anyway, decided not to go back. I hit probably the 3-month mark, and I thought, so I met this girl on the beach in Spain. I was on my own. I was like, what the hell am I doing? I hit this sort of crisis point. It's like, what the hell? Like, I don't know, maybe I should go back home. I'd left another boyfriend back home because I'd broken up with the other boyfriends come and go. There's another one back home. So I thought maybe I should go back. I'd left here. Anyway, this girl just turned up on the beach and she's like in the same boat. She's an Australian girl. And I said, look, I've got, meeting a friend in Greece in like a month's time. I'm supposed to go across Spain, across Corsica. And I was always on my own because I traveled with friends, but then I was going to do that on my own. I didn't really like these groups. So there were a lot of Aussie backpackers around and you could get into these tours and groups. I didn't like any of that. I just wanted to do it on, myself. So she was the same. So we just literally that afternoon got on a bus up to Madrid, got on a plane, went to Turkey. So we landed in Istanbul. She's like, let's just go to Turkey. I'm like, let's do it. So then we did. We were in Turkey by that night and I spent a month in Turkey just traveling around with her and I just getting buses. We did a few hikes. We stayed in places, and just, yeah, her and I kind of did that. And then I ended up in Greece and met the friend who was coming over from Australia on a tour.
Yeah.
And we met, and she was supposed to go back. We were spending a week on the islands together, and she was going to go back, and I was going to continue on to the UK and probably work because I had a working holiday visa. I thought I'll do that. And she decided to stay. And I'd met a guy in Turkey that was telling me about Israel, and I'd read a few books, and I thought he'd worked on a kibbutz in Israel. And I just thought, that sounds awesome. So I jumped on, my friend decided also not to go back. We jumped on a boat from Athens to Haifa, a 3-day boat that took us to Haifa. And we just found a kibbutz to volunteer on. And then we were there for, don't know how many months, 4 or 5 months. I don't know.
That's amazing. Wait, so to go back, you originally were going to go to Sydney to become a naturopath. But
in my head,
in your head, but then what shifted to say, I'm actually going to just now travel for like the next year? Like, did you say, actually, I don't want to be a naturopath. I'm going to take another year and travel to figure out what I want? Was that a conscious shift?
It wasn't a time frame shift as in I'll take another year, or I just was like, yeah, I just didn't want to go back. I was like, no, because I wasn't sure I wanted to be a naturopath. I was always thinking because I don't know, I had no idea, but I knew I loved seeing different countries. I was reading a lot of historical fiction as well. So then I'd go to like Athens and Delphi and all these places. They're the characters of the books I was reading. And I was like, I love this. And so I thought I'd just keep going, but always had that panic of, okay, where is this ending? How can I achieve something? But in a way, what was lucky was being away, I felt like I wasn't being judged to achieve anything because I was already achieving by being out of the country doing something that was kind of obscure to people, but it looked like I was doing something. So it was kind of a win-win in that sense. You know what I mean?
Took the pressure off.
Are you kidding? To people
took the
like
pressure off.
To normal people, like at least I can say to an American who went to college and then graduated and got married, started having kids, your life to me would have looked like full achievement, and you were completely doing something meaningful. To do all that traveling and have all that life experience, I just think I think that's such a huge meaningful achievement, not just an achievement for achievement's sake. And I know what you're saying. You wish you could have let go of whatever, being worried about how is this going to end, is everything going to be okay, and had been allowed yourself to be totally present in that experience. But I understand that's the anxiety, right? That's like in there, not letting you let go. But what a special moment for anyone to have in life. I think that's amazing what you've seen and the experiences you've had, and to have the courage to do so much of it alone. I wouldn't have had that courage. I think that's amazing.
No. Well, I then met people, like I had my friend and I met a boyfriend in Germany. And Israel. So luckily, but I just, I don't know. It was kind of a good way to exist in not knowing, because I was able to look like I was doing something without, it was okay. And so I never wanted to go back to Australia then, because that sense then started to kick in, because then I would have to face that pressure again. And that thought of, oh my goodness, like, what am I? What have I done? Well, I haven't ticked any of these boxes that they acknowledge, really. So being away was just this away thing. No one really knew what I was doing. No one really was involved in it, but I was away, so I must be doing something. So it was great. I could just kind of...
Also, I know there were phones starting then, but there wasn't social media. So it's not like you were posting up like now. Could you imagine?
MySpace,
you were living the dream of an influencer. You think
Oh
about it. You were living the dream of an influencer.
Probably will.
Every day would be like, look, I'm here now. But
here I am.
But the fact that didn't exist allowed you to just be away, right?
Exactly.
And they didn't.
It was perfect. Yeah,
it was perfect. And so, so then you said you were in Israel for like 4 to 5 months. Then what did you do after that?
Yeah, I was there. It might have been 6 months. I don't know. Yeah, I was there for a while, and then I had to be in the UK by a certain amount of time to activate my working holiday visa, because we get these things as Australians that you can work there for 2 years on this working holiday visa. It's like a reciprocal thing. So I had that same thing I had in Canada. I think it's a Commonwealth thing, So I had to get there by whatever date it was. I don't know. So then I ended up doing that. I flew out of Israel whenever that was that I had to, and I got to London. And it was really difficult being in London. I got there, got a job in a pub because I had no money, obviously. I was like living on fumes as I was going. But got a job in a pub and lived in a pub and kind of did that. But I actually hated it when I first went there. I was like, because the meaning again, being in Israel and having that, you're at the cold face of life. There's life and death going on there. What was happening at the time because of the stuff between Israel and Lebanon. I was like right there. It's like real. That's so real. And that's the kind of purpose I think I was always looking for, but never had the courage to lean into. Like I could have gone and done some volunteering. I could have. But I always thought, no, I've got to get back on track to, so I always was pulled. So then I went to London. So there was always this push-pull going on. And yeah, I worked there. I probably worked there for 3 months, 2 months, enough money. And then the boyfriend in Israel flew to London. We drove all around the UK. We just got a car and went right up to Scotland, Isle of Skye, down everywhere. And then he had an American passport. So he flew to LA. And so then I flew to LA in the January because I was like, I just don't want to be in England anymore. And just bizarrely met this English couple who were often in America, often in England. So I ended up working for them. And then I was traveling to England with them. They had a house in Italy, traveled to Italy with them as a nanny. So I looked after their little girl. She was a 2-year-old. And so I did that for, I don't know, it must be a year. And then, went back to Sydney because 9/11 happened. And so I was, at the time, we were about to fly. We were actually in LA at that time, but we were about to fly back to England. And I was like, going to leave anyway, that job, because I was going to go possibly to Israel or, Italy, because I loved it, Italy, because we'd spent a lot of time there. So I flew home. I thought, I'll fly home because I'm in a state of flux. 9/11, haven't seen my parents in 2 years or whatever it was. And my mum, so I didn't tell my mum. So I drove home, flew home, drove up there. I was like, oh. So that was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
but
cool.
that was kind of cool. So I saw her, and then I ended up, I went to Sydney for a couple of months, worked in a hotel because I was still had contact with the Sheraton. So I got a job there. But then I thought, I'll do my naturopath, my natural medicine. Just couldn't do it because the pressure again, I was like, no. So I left again. So I flew back to that family who were spending a lot of time in Italy and LA. And then I ended up staying in London for a bit. And then I spent the whole summer with them in Italy. So then I ended up I was sort of London, but then Italy. And then I met someone during all of that in Germany. So I ended up moving to Germany to be with him after a while. So I spent 5 summers down in Tuscany with this family, which was amazing. Every summer I'd fly down. Even when I was living in Germany, I was like, fly down and
That is amazing.
So
that is amazing.
I just kept going, And then when I was in Germany, I went back to uni by distance. So I studied German and went back to uni, but I did a media degree at that point. So there was always this, but that's the thing I think about us Gen Xers. You have that, you double down all the time. You're trying to get things done however you need to. So I always found ways. So I got my degree, I learnt German. So I got to learn German, got my degree there, did well. Then I got an internship at CNN in London. So he and I both went to London. We both moved to London in 2005, I think it was. Kai's was 5 years.
Well, I was going to say, how long did it take you to get the media degree?
So because I got credit for some of the stuff I'd already studied at uni, it was quicker. And I was doing double time. So because I was doing it by distance. Okay. Because a media degree, I think you only get like 3 or 4 subjects a semester or something. So I was doing like 6. And then I was like, so I don't know how long it took me, maybe 3 years, 2 years.
Were you going on an actual campus in Germany or was it?
No, just by distance. And so back then, I think they sent me tapes. I can't remember how I did it.
It wasn't computer, even though there were computers, but that still wasn't a thing.
It was email. Like I would have got email, and I remember sending off physical assignments, posting them.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I was dedicated. Like I was a grafter. I was a grafter. Yeah. Like I could do it, I'm like, yeah. And I was working 3 jobs. I was working at a pub and I was teaching English as well to business people. And I was doing all the stuff, like crazy stuff.
Yeah, totally. How long did it take you to learn German?
I was quick to get conversational, like probably a few months, because I worked at an English pub, but I refused to speak English. I said, I'm speaking German. So I spoke German, and my boyfriend was German. So he and I would only speak German when we did things like go shopping or go. So I and I just studied. Like I was studying German, like I don't know, do 10 hours a week or something, 11 hours. Whilst working, I worked at the Sheraton, I worked at an English pub, and I taught English to business. So I was doing all that. I mean, it was crazy. Like, I think Gen Xers are a bit crazy. We would graft,
Yeah.
and I did
Yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah.
And so I learned because I was integrated.
Are you fluent in German?
No, not now. Like, I lived there 2 years. I was with that guy for 5 years. And I was fine. I was conversational. I could work in German, but my vocabulary wasn't great. And now I mean, I could. If I went to Germany now, I would get around, I would chat, I
Right.
would, do all
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
stuff. But I wouldn't say I'm not fluent.
That's still really cool, though.
During that time, do you recall sleeping much?
No.
Was sleep a
I
thing?
remember running into a pole once because I was so tired. Because it was all about doing everything like fast as you
Yeah.
can to get to
Yeah,
the
yeah,
next
yeah.
thing. And whether that was earn a stack of money, like I did when I was tarring roads, you do as fast as you can, get the degree, do double time, get the money, get the, and then you can move on. Then I would travel, then I would go, But it sort of changed when I went to London.
Everything's done in survival mode. It's like
Surviving,
even like
yeah.
I think even as Gen Xers, like if you're washing, now I've learned how to downshift, but I used to wash the dishes like I'm in survival mode. I'd go do laundry like I'm in. Everything was rush, rush, rush. Like
Yeah.
everything you're doing, none of it's like where
Yeah.
you let your nervous system regulate it all. Okay, so you go to London to get the job take the job with CNN. Is that what you said?
Yeah, well, we moved there anyway because I got a visa as an EU partner. So he and I moved there anyway. He got a job there. So I just did a bit of temp work initially while I was finishing my media degree. And then probably a year in, I got a job I got work experience at a documentary company on Channel 4, and then I got offered an internship at CNN. So then I went and did the internship at CNN. But I went back into documentaries because I just really liked it, and I got offered a job back doing that. So I ended up, So that was sort of the first time that I'd sort of landed properly somewhere.
Right. Did you feel when you got into documentary work, did you feel like, okay, I found something that legitimizes my life right now, that is, I can say, look what I'm doing, and show your family, your friends, or whatever, that there's something here?
What do you do? I produce documentaries. Wow.
Right.
It's that you're valid.
Yeah.
You all of a sudden,
Yeah.
you're valid, and it definitely was that. But again, I lived in panic mode, that imposter syndrome. I remember having sleepless nights going, how can I do this? I can't do this. Like I'm not good enough to do, like, it was just the same thing came with me again, but it was really good at dinner parties and family gatherings because you can go, I produced documentaries.
CNN.
Looks great,
You got, because at CNN, the internship, was that documentary based?
No, so that was just news in general. So I was on the news desk and I did a few feature things and bits and bobs because it was like a wider range. But I didn't really like, because of my nervous system as well, that whole news desk thing of like, I couldn't, stress me out. Whereas documentaries, long form, you sit, you research, you do, So, and also because I was still on that purpose thing, I thought, well, I can do things on religion, or I can do things on, so I could see a version of me possibly that might find that satisfaction in documentaries that I probably wouldn't have. I mean, I don't know. I never had confidence that I would be able to do anything. This was the theme constantly. Yeah. Even when I was producing stuff, I was like freaked out. Oh my God, I can't do this. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like it was like your little demon that lived on your shoulder. No matter what you were doing, it would not allow you to find peace wherever you went. Like, as amazing as the experience was, it would not let you embrace it and accept it and be present in it and flourish in it.
Never.
How long did you do work in documentaries?
I think about 6 years, 5, 6 years.
And you said you went to Russia for that?
Yeah, so we filmed, well, because, so I ended up, we worked on a lot of stuff for National Geographic, Discovery Channel, BBC, because I worked in, and this is where it kind of all came together and why I moved up quite quickly, because I must have been 28. I can't remember when I started. And within a year or so, I was assistant producer, and then I was producer with this small company quite quickly. I think because I had a science background, because I was older. So that played into everything because they put me automatically on specialist factual stuff. So I was doing history or science. So we were doing stuff. So the one in Russia was that these bones had been found out in Siberia that they thought might be the Romanov bones. So I don't know if you know the story of the Romanovs, and for years there was this question of whether Anastasia had survived or not, and all of that. Yeah. So they'd found these bones. So what we used to do, you'd read in the newspaper, oh, someone's found the bones. And so then my job was, or me and the director, but, because it was a small team, we're like, okay, let's try and get access to that. So I'm ringing the scientists and ringing the guy, everyone that was involved, because they automatically, there was some part of the FBI, like, I don't know, these scientists, I don't know what the connection was, but they were somehow part of the American government. And so they were going to do all the DNA and all the stuff on this Romanov thing. So I had to get access to that. So I'm ringing them and, but that didn't bother me, that kind of thing. And yeah, we ended up working on it. We got the access signed off, and then we sold it to National Geographic, and they paid for the whole production. So then we were working as National Geographic production company. And so we had to fly out to Russia for that, to film and do all the stuff. Yeah, to follow that scientific investigation and the whole thing and talk to everybody. And yeah, it was really, there's a lot of stories attached to that, but yeah, it was really cool.
That's amazing. Would you say that was, out of all the documentaries you worked on, that was the most exciting one?
I think so. Yeah, I found that really exciting. There was a lot. Well, I worked on another one for the BBC that was on so in the channel, it was an island called Alderney, and in the English Channel, and there's the ship that was down, the shipwreck from an Elizabethan era ship, and so it was part of the Armada, and so we did a documentary on that. So we were out on the in a big ship diving, and we were filming underneath and bringing up what was on there. There was a cannon on there. Then we had to get the cannon reconstructed up in northern England, and tested it and to see how these cannons would have worked. We did a firing range. That one I found quite interesting as well. It was very hands-on because we were out there on the ship for ages and filming, and we went to that was fun as well. But I did love being in Russia. Yeah, lots of things actually. There was lots of interesting. Yeah, I went to Switzerland, went to Norway, filmed a Viking ship in Norway. Lots of things.
That's amazing. So the stuff that you produced, is that accessible? Like if we were to look it up, would it be things you've worked on?
Yeah, like there's stuff. So I probably, it's on there, but I worked for production companies. So I don't know in terms of my title, but there's some Channel 4 stuff, Channel 5, National Geographic, BBC. Yeah, there's stuff. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
That is really cool. Have you shown any of that to your children?
No. I don't really have it though. Like I do have DVDs. Yeah, I've got some DVDs I could show them. Yeah.
That is so cool. That is the coolest.
Well, just the stories you could tell them probably.
Your life in general so far is so, and I understand that there's a simmering anxiety and imposter syndrome. There's layers of underneath all this stuff that's sabotaging your experience. But from an outsider looking in, the life experience you've had is really awesome. It's really cool.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing, and maybe that's what I was trying to construct, so it looked like I'd achieved something without actually having. Do you know what I mean? That's the whole paradox of it.
You didn't accept it inside, right? Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's because I'm here to tell you it's really cool and you did achieve it. But I get it. I totally understand the the feeling of lack of self-worth and validation in it. But it's really freaking cool. I know because that's his dream. He would love to do a documentary.
I'm so jealous.
Oh, really? You should do that. Do documentaries.
Oh,
it's on my bucket list, but I've got this thing called time.
I know.
Yeah, finding the time.
Challenge. I will because I love like filming and photography and cinematography. I'm not so much the storyteller. Like I find that what you're describing, that you guys got the cannons out of the water and brought them to northern England to reconstruct the test so you can tell the story. That's pretty freaking cool.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
How long did you do that? Work in documentaries?
I think I started at 28 when I went in as a researcher because I was just finished my thing, I think 28. And then I had my son at 34, and I was supposed to, because I was filming this thing in Norway where a Viking ship, we were reconstructing a Viking ship for National Geographic, but it was like a long form. I don't even know if it ever got finished because I was supposed to film when my son was 3 months old. We were supposed to go there. So I was filming up until I was 8 months pregnant. Because I was hardcore. I just thought there was two things going on. One, I was, hardcore. I have to be a career woman, because that's what you should be. But also there was always this pull of, like, the next step for me would be to take creative control, right? I should, if I'm going to pursue that career, really. Whereas I outsourced that creative control constantly. I didn't want it. I just did this stuff. Even though I ended up with the producer label, I never really put any of my opinion or anything in that.
What was your role? Were you filming? Were you the one doing the research to construct the story to give to someone else to film and stitch it together? What was your...
Kind of everything, because I was working for this small company. So I initially, when I went with the company, I must have been 30 by then. I was the assistant producer, and then I became a producer label. But it was just him and I mainly. Like, we had, production secretaries doing, booking flights and doing all that kind of stuff, putting the finances and all that. But he and I did everything. So we'd get the article. Okay, we want to do that. I would get access. I would do all the research, find out what's going on, who we need to talk to, sign them up, get them on board, work out what all the interview questions were, how it was going to be. And he would be in the background putting the story together. Okay, how could this all fit as a narrative? And so then we'd show up, and if it was a big shoot, we'd get like cameramen, we'd have all the people, the cameraman. But he and I, the director and I, would do the interviews and all that sort of stuff. But then on things like the Viking ship, because it was an observational thing, so it went over a long time. So things like that, it would be us just taking the camera, doing the sound, because you just go in and just do it low budget just to get the shots, really. Like, it wasn't necessarily about interviews. So I ended up doing a lot of stuff in the end because, the budgets, and it was a small company.
That gives me kind of some hope, because you just got to wear multiple hats and you just make it happen and figure it all out.
You hustle.
You hustle, yeah.
That's the theme.
Yeah.
You hustle. So
you can absolutely do it. You're doing a podcast. Like, come on, you can do it.
But that's what I mean. It's like you did all those things. You wore all the hats, and probably the finished product's pretty damn cool. And none of us, the layman, doesn't know what goes into it and how much time it takes, and the thought and the energy and the lack of sleep and all of that, right?
Yeah, they don't know. And documentaries as well. Like, it's, the budgets are a lot lower than like a film, like any drama or anything like this. And so you got to work out where to put your money. So you might hire cameraman and soundman and everything for like a big shoot. You might line up interview after interview for like a week, and you go in and you film stuff. Like, we filmed the cannon being done, and we had all sorts of things going on. But then for stuff that okay, we just need shots of this, so you just go in on your own. But you might get a researcher to take the camera in, or you might go in yourself, and you just kind of so you just got to use your budget wisely. It's not massive budgets for it. So
cool.
You got to this point where you were ready to go to the next level, but then you became a mother.
Yeah, but I was holding myself for a long time, not doing creative control of stuff. Like, I knew that, and I was at the same time, and I had been doing sort of 3 years previously studying psychology. So I was working all the hours and doing a psychology degree by distance because I needed purpose. I'm like, okay, well, maybe like, I was just, because I never allowed myself to think of me. I was always focused on the external. I was living as a reaction. Okay, this looks good. This could be good. So I never allowed. So I was always not quite happy. So there was always something spinning that I could go, okay, maybe this is my thing, So I was studying psychology as well. I did 3 years of the psychology degree, and I was nearly ready to graduate. I got pregnant. So I was like, I can't do everything. But I had my son. I was supposed to film in Norway, for this ship thing, 3 months pregnant. When he was 3 months. But the moment I had him, I just was like, there is no way I am going, because I would have had to have a nanny full time, right? Like, because my husband works very long hours. He's, executive, and wouldn't have been there. Before having the child, yes, I was like, yeah, I'll just get a nanny, they'd have to be there overnight sometimes because if I'm flying, whatever. But I'd already, during the pregnancy, hit this point of everything had kind of come to the front of my imposter syndrome. I thought, I can't do it. I can't even imagine. I was already very nervous about my abilities, even though it's just how it was. But when I had him,
professionally or as a mother? Were you
that was
feeling yeah, were you
professionally.
okay. What about becoming a mother? Were you having any worries before you had your son? Isn't that
No.
interesting? Because you know
Mm.
Purpose.
how many women though,
Purpose.
before having a child though, I mean, that goes off your pattern because you have had, it feels like you did not, even before you had him, the imposter syndrome was not seeping into the idea of motherhood, which
No.
is very interesting.
I think because I was probably raised to be a mum in a way.
Mm.
Well, that
Mm-hmm.
was what was modeled to me. So I
I'm
Right.
knew
sure.
that about me. I think so.
Yeah.
I think it was so
Yeah.
integral to who I was, and I was the oldest girl, so I had that blueprint. I had a blueprint of something that I knew the steps for. So I think it was
Yeah.
different, maybe. I don't
Well, to your
know.
grandmother and your mom, right?
Grandma, mom, yeah.
And
And my
probably
aunties, all of them,
and different. Yeah.
I had a
Yeah.
million role models for that job. I knew
Yeah.
like, you don't know it really until you step into it, but you
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
know the blueprint.
Yeah.
So I
That
think
makes
I
sense.
wasn't worried about that, but I did worry about this, not worry, but in my mind, before having my son, I was like, well, I'm just going to go back to work because that's who I am. Because you don't really have an identity as a mom, right? That's not a thing. So I was this other role. Okay, well, I'm that. I've got to be either a psychologist or I've got to do something. But I wasn't quite sure now what that was. But it was never the mum role. But
Right.
yeah, when I had my son, it was that. I remember after I'd had him, it was a very long birth, but I had him. Everyone was gone, quiet of night, and I just remember holding him, and I was just crying. And I'm like, there is no way. Like for the first time my whole life, I wasn't anxious. I was like, someone needs me, and I'm the only person that can do that job. And so that overwhelming sense of peace that I'd always wanted was just there. I was like, that's the
Yeah.
job. Nobody else can do that job. And he can't survive on his own. Someone has to be there. So that sense of purpose was just there, right? Like, and then I had
Yeah.
my daughter, she's 17 months younger. And I did try and work a bit. I just kept up, and I was going to bloody, meetings with him screaming, and I was trying to do all this
Yeah.
stuff, but
Trying to do it. Yeah.
trying to do it, but not very wholeheartedly. I sort of didn't really want to, but I thought I need to keep something going on. But then, yeah, then I had my daughter, and it was like also I had an excuse to not to achieve, right? Like the
Right.
conventional things. And I was
Yeah.
so relieved almost. It was like a relief. It was a purpose. It was all the stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting in the kitchen when I had both kids. I had my son walking around and my daughter in the sling. And I was just like, that's the moment I realized that for the first time in my life, I didn't feel panicked because I'd lived with that panic for years. And so
Yeah.
it was awesome because I had an excuse to be at home because the kids were little. I had, a purpose because those are needed. Nobody else could do it. I had the blueprint. So it wasn't like I was scared of being a mum. I sort of thought, yeah, I can do this because I don't know, I was brought up in that way. But it was when they started to get a bit older, everyone starts to question, oh, so what do you do?
Yeah.
All that. And that's when
Yeah.
everything, all the memories, all the PTSD comes back of, oh my gosh, like I, uh, I'm not anything. Like, and then it starts
Dang.
again.
Like how old were you and the kids when that started seeping back in and disrupting your peace?
I think probably when my son started school. So he
Like,
started at age 4 in the UK. So
okay.
yeah, he started at age 4. So I would have been 38. No, yeah, 38 maybe. 38. Yeah.
Isn't it amazing though? I always find I find it interesting when people think that when your kids go to school that that's automatically when a mom is going to possibly start looking for work again or go back to her job, when I personally found myself more busy when my kids went to school
Yeah.
because they get involved in activities or there's things going on at school, or then you can finally take care of stuff at home that's been ignored for so long. Or when your kids are sick, you have to be home with them. So you're still needed just as much, if not more, in my opinion. And so that's never aligned for me. Now, maybe,
Yeah.
when they're older, like high school, I could see that. This is my opinion. But I truly feel that even when they're in school, you're still needed just as much. And so that's never, again, that's never aligned with me that
Yeah.
that's when a woman should be it should automatically be assumed she's going to go back to work.
Yeah, I agree absolutely because it is busier. I even find it quite busy now, like both in high school.
Yeah.
And there's a lot falls on you, right? You're organizing a lot of stuff, but especially in primary school because you're facilitating their life still, and you're in touch with the moms. You're in touch, what's going on, who's this, where do you need to go, what do you need to be, what do you need to have at school, There's a lot. It is a full-time job. It's just the hours are not conventional full-time. So, but you're spread like across the day in a million different ways. It's busy.
24/7.
You're the
Yeah.
homemaker, home manager
You're
type of thing.
everything. And then also when they do hit that middle school, high school is when you're the therapist. If you've been able to figure out how to have open communication with your children, then they come to you with their anxiety, with their worries, with their insecurities, with their problems. These kids were mean to me at school today. And that those conversations require so much energy and effort. And sometimes those happen late at night. A lot of children decide, or it's when they feel motivated to share all their worries at like 10 o'clock at night when you're ready to go to bed. And so there's things that there's no punch out. It's 24/7, 365.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, our young people would benefit if someone was home more, to be there to listen to what's going on in their head. Because I think that's a problem, especially with social media and technology, and the doom scrolling. They're ingesting so much that we don't even know about. And so
Oh,
many of
absolutely.
they're internalizing so much. So just to have the finger on the pulse, somebody needs to be around to notice the
Yeah.
nuances and the changes in your child.
Yeah. Yeah, and you catch things before they become a bigger issue. Like you're constantly on the alert, for stuff that's going on. And I think that is a thing, that's also a product of our generation now too, because as mothers, we are more emotionally available because we understand what's going on, whereas the generation before weren't, wasn't as big a deal. It wasn't a thing that society recognized, but we know it. And once you know it, you can't ignore it. So you're there. And the
Yeah.
layer of motherhood's become even heavier. Like it's because it's not that your child's got a thing going on, but you're the one to fix it, to know about it, to find how to solve it. You might want to talk to the school, you might want to talk to a doctor, or so. You're workshopping all the time,
Yeah.
and you have to be available to them to catch those. I find when they come in, it's from school often. Is a time when like you can read the thing. I have a neurodiverse son as well, and that's another layer of
Yeah.
caring and being
Yeah.
there. And it doesn't flex around a 9 to 5. You can't, if you need to be there at 10 in the morning because something's gone down, or you're there. And it's a 24/7 role, and it's a full-time role. And I think we were taught to not validate, like that wasn't valid. It just wasn't valid. So we all took on these jobs, which I'm really thankful actually. And I tried to, I wrote a novel, I had to have something to say, I'm doing this, I'm busy doing this. But, we all took on that because that's what made us valuable, by having an income or by having a job title or whatever. But then we never, ever left the other full-time role, which was in the home. So all of us, we're having mental health crises, just by a product of our birth year because of the expectations we have on ourselves and the non-acknowledgement of the role we never left. Women left the home, they left the kitchen, but they still carried that role. So now everybody's doing 2 jobs, and it's huge. It's not okay. Yeah.
Well, and the conversation, I've said this before, didn't happen on that. Okay, you're going to have women join the workforce, and as they should. 100% should have the choice to do that. I'm 100% believer in that. But if they're going to choose to do that and they're going to have these opportunities, then the domestic home front needs to be addressed too. And their partners need to step up on the domestic home front. You cannot still expect the woman to do everything she was doing before, as you said, and go to work full time and nothing changes with her partner. He's still doing the same thing. that still, I do
Yeah.
think the millennials have done a wonderful, I think they've been the beginning of the shift of that. I think that a lot of the younger millennial women at least are communicating with their partners of, look, if I'm doing this, then you're doing this. This isn't how, or
Yeah.
else I'm staying home. And
Yeah.
I think Gen Z women will be a huge part of that. But I think we don't talk about it enough in society at all.
But I think, yeah, we don't talk about it enough. And I think the other thing is, it's a whole systemic problem, right? Because we exist in a patriarch. And what happened when women, 60s, 70s, coming out of the kitchen, going into the workforce, they moved into the workforce in a patriarch. I mean, we even put on the shoulder pads to have big shoulders like men. We put the trousers on, off we go. We walked in as men into this world, into this patriarch, a system that allows for the way things function as men and whatever, and without a family and because that was kind of not involved in the workplace at all. Whereas what we should have done, like if you look back in hindsight and how it should change, is we should have walked in as women and fought for the right for the working world to accommodate this other life, because even now you go in, and I know some families who are pretty good at 50-50 split, but it's still a juggle because the demands of the patriarch, the demands of the system we work in that's been evolved for men who don't have to do anything at home, is a structure that really makes it difficult because it doesn't acknowledge like different working hours or less load. Maybe you can still be paid a certain amount, but for doing things, less, or, we should change it completely. Like, I don't know what the solution is, but what would it look like if we'd entered a matriarch, and there was all these roles? And because what's happening is like the monetary reward for your work is based on being there a lot and being a high role and being this, and money's the currency. We all need it, unfortunately. So, but even things like, so my husband earns enough so that can cover all of our expenses, but because he earns a lot, he pays a hell of a lot in tax. But he couldn't earn that money without me picking up all the other slack. And so even little things like that, where his income should be taxed as if it was two people rather than one, would make a difference, right? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we could change to make this work better. But we have plugged ourselves in, shoulder pads and all, into a patriarch. And now we're trying to find the best way around it, which means, we have to share the load at home, we have to split things, but the system's still demanding that workload from us, regardless of whether dad and mum are now juggling school pickups, dad and mum are now juggling meals, it's nothing's giving in that perspective. And I think the system needs to change as well as we need to change, but I feel like the system needs to change, do you know?
No, no, I think it's absolutely such a great point. And I think it's weird because when you were talking about that, it almost brought me to thinking about how if you allow women to be in their feminine, they're more powerful, right? You're going to get so much more if women are embraced in their feminine. And within the patriarchy, they're not allowed to be in their feminine. They're supposed to be in their masculine. And that's where a lot of the friction comes from, is if it was restructured and women could be in their feminine within their employment and their job, they would thrive even more, and the business would benefit from that, if that makes sense.
But, well, it's all those soft skills, right?
Yes.
It's valuing those soft skills.
Yes. But you could have women can be in that same room with men, but if they're allowed to be in their feminine, they may get even more done or be more successful. And I don't know if spaces, like to your point, is being created yet. I don't know if we're even
we're not allowed to exist as women still. I don't think. I feel like the workforce rewards masculine behavior. I think if you're decisive, if you're, all those things, that still feels quite rewarded. Whereas all that stuff that women bring to society, I mean, society couldn't function without all the things women do. The way we bring people together, we facilitate so many things. We're the ones, if a neighbour's sick, that's taking them a dinner because they can't, make it themselves. Or we're the one in the office, if there's someone who's a bit off, we'll check in with them, we'll notice it. So a lot of our energy goes to that stuff, but that's not valued. But that's the glue that actually does hold a lot together. And now there's more of us in the workplace. We should be able to monetize that kind of, because money's the currency. I mean, it's sad, but it kind of is. We all need it, and that's why we work, and that's why we achieve, and that's all that's the way it is, unfortunately. But a lot
Yeah.
of the things, if we step into our feminine, I think you lose money because it's not valued. So it's taking you too much time to go and check in on everyone's mental health and make sure everyone's, okay. It's taking time off what the goals are and what the progress is of things. And so it's not valued in the right way.
It's a fascinating thing because there's no value in what you're describing, no perceived value today for someone to be the the caretaker in some ways, the
Yeah.
glue in a sense. That's not valued at all, at least not here in the US. I
Not
am
here,
curious,
no.
is it different at all in Australia? Like we're fairly cut and dry here. We're offshoring most of our jobs to India and other cheaper labor markets. Do you guys have that same thing going on?
I think it's
We
kind of
have
the
a lot of
same.
women in the workforce, and they are valuable. I would say honestly, they are, at least in corporate America, they're viewed as equals, right?
Yeah.
But I'm curious, is it like that in Australia? I don't know. I've been to Europe. I've done business in Germany and France, the Netherlands, and the UK. UK is probably the most egalitarian culture over there, I think. Whereas there's definitely a patriarch in France and Netherlands, probably
Yeah.
Germany.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're like England, I think, women are very much, equal in the workplace, well represented. I mean, I'm sure it's not equal. There's still a lot of fighting going on to get that
There's
exact
some
status,
dynamics
but
there.
yeah, but generally, if you walk into a workplace, there's women in leadership roles, there's all the stuff going
Yeah,
on,
yeah.
and it is. But I think the thing that's lacking is just a much broader systemic issue of, so women can now be in those roles, but those roles are still quite masculine role. They're still the wage you get that's a high wage is based on that same kind of output and markers. I don't know, like the way society works, the people that the mums that are at home holding it together, picking up the elderly or the sick or dropping the kids or, making sure people are talking, things are harmonious, things are, all those things women do quite well. I just don't, that's not really a part of, there's two things. There's the work world that gets paid, and then there's this other world that people have to try and operate, even mums that are in the office. And I don't know how that changed. I don't know how you can change that, because money is what counts, right? And the things that generate money, you get paid for. And so
Yeah.
And
that's, women
so,
are in the system, but not as that woman,
But
I
but
suppose.
even in like Australia, I'm curious for us here, I'll call it, say, service sector type of job, but whether it's you're working at a restaurant, or you're the wait staff, or in a hotel, you're the what is it,
the concierge or the front desk person.
all of those people, they're not paid nearly as that well compared to, say, corporate executive jobs. Is it
Yeah.
similar in Australia?
Yeah, same.
I would
It's
assume
the
so,
same.
right? Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah, and I think that's just a product, I guess, because to be an executive, you have to have a certain amount of stress level. I guess you're carrying staff,
Yeah,
got to
yeah.
educate, and I
Yeah.
think that's always what's, made income, the way it is and structured the way it is, I suppose. But, those people that are like waiting table, they're still putting in a lot of energy to do that, but it's
Yes.
lower,
It's
but
relentless.
Yes.
yeah,
But you've talked about like women in the workforce, how they're not compensated for their female attributes, which is basically nurturing. Everything you were talking about is our nurturing qualities, whether you're checking in with the colleague, whatever it is. They're getting all that for free, right? The company's getting that for
yeah,
free because we
yeah.
give that naturally. We
That's what
we
we
are
do.
we're a faucet of it. So
Yeah,
we are the glue, and we are the nuance, the feminine nuance is sprinkled through the company, and and affect our coworkers and all that. That's free to the company. And to your
yeah,
point of, if there was a way to recognize the attributes women bring into the workforce that are completely feminine and completely different from what men bring, that would be a way
Uh,
to to even it out, because it is nuanced, but it's powerful. And imagine if space was created for women to truly be in their feminine in the workforce, I don't think companies realize they would be so much more successful.
Absolutely. They would
You
be
know,
much more successful. But it's not
so much more
quantifiable
successful.
and it's no one understands it because we've never had it. We've lived through a patriarchal
Yeah.
lens forever. That's all. It's
Yeah.
kind of even hard for some people to grasp that concept of those skills that we bring that are
Yeah.
unpaid for and kind of invisible. You know, it's the
I don't
same
think it
skills we bring to
exists.
home.
I don't think it
Yeah.
exists. To your point, the construct is not. That's not the construct. So
No,
women
No
showing
one knows that.
nurture, that's not a
it's
thing.
not trying.
No,
You
I'm
just
just saying
do.
women, but
But
not all women nurture. What I think you're
well,
describing, and I tend to agree with, is that women are fitting into that patriarchy, so they're leaving that at the door in a
Yeah.
sense. And if you
And some
bring it,
women,
it's
yeah,
not
go.
valued. It's not. It doesn't check
well,
a
it may
box.
be viewed as a weakness
Yeah.
also.
It
Maybe
might be
used
viewed as
against them.
weakness. Yeah. Well, that's the thing because it doesn't fit the narrative or doesn't fit the mold, I
Yeah,
suppose. You know, but I think it's
not
very
in the job
hard.
description.
It's hard, yeah, and it's hard for us to even picture that, right? What does it look like if it's not a patron? Like, even as a woman with those skills, we don't value them. Like, you don't think, how can
Yeah.
you even imagine in your mind that part of your wage includes that ability you have to nurture. Like it doesn't even feel right in our minds because we're products of the system too. So it's like, how do
Oh,
you?
women can be women's worst enemy. You
Yeah,
first need women
I think you
to
are.
buy in.
Yeah.
I know
yeah,
you think that. The women need to buy into this. He always says, "You guys are your worst." And when it really comes down to it, yeah, there are less girls than girls. And Gen X women were not raised to be girls.
no,
We were raised to compete with each other for men. Number one,
absolutely,
beauty.
yeah,
Number two, and then employment. Um, our daughters are girls because we've made sure to most of them and
yeah,
their girlhood is amazing, the Gen Z women girlhood, and as I love to see it, it's a beautiful thing, but we weren't given that space to even like support each other in any way,
no,
and that's part of the patriarchy.
yep,
And society with the stupid bullshit beauty standards pits us against
right.
each other. That would be the first, and maybe this younger generation of women will be the first to, because they are
Are
using
you
their
seeing
voice.
that in Australia? Because we do see girls, the more
Yeah.
girl power here with the younger girls.
Yeah,
Are you seeing
I
that
think
as well?
so. I think so. I mean, my daughter's 13, so it's hard to know how that's going to
And
play
that's
out.
a
But
hard age.
Yeah.
definitely,
Yeah.
yeah, she's got a very strong connection with her girlfriends, and they come first. And there's definitely all of that. I don't know. I mean, I know when we were that age, and it was like you were, as you say, you're competing for attention from boys. You're competing to be chosen as the one, and
Yes.
and you were pitted against each other. I don't see
Totally.
that, but I don't know if that's because she's too young. But I'm hoping, like as you're saying, that it's going to play out very differently.
No, because her age is when it really goes crazy. Like the Mean Girl stuff in that eighth grade, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth grade age is when you would totally be seeing it.
Oh, so she's
You
really solid. Yeah, her friend
know,
group seem to. They're
like they
great.
compliment each other. Like
Yeah.
my daughter will tell me how they'd be at a bar and they'll tell a girl how beautiful she looks or she loves. We'd be like, "What is she wearing?" Or
Well,
like,
you'd
"She
put
looks."
it down. Oh, look at her eyelashes. Oh.
No, I'm not. I'm not. I know everything isn't perfect. I know there's still that exists, but there has been a shift, and I think it's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing. And maybe they will be the beginning of a shift with with the patriarchy because they're very anti-patriarchy too. So,
Yeah. Yeah, they
You
are.
need
I think that's true.
that.
Might shift.
I think women need to lead the
You
shift.
do.
And
You
I think they've been
absolutely do.
trying. I mean, obviously, it started with fighting to get women in the
Yeah, no, I think
workforce.
it'll
I
be an
mean, yes,
organic thing over
yes,
time. It's an evolutionary thing,
yes.
and
Yeah.
it's just not fast, and it's
But
But it'll
validating,
take time. It's
it
it
will.
will.
valuable.
I hope that they're the beginning of the change. But I think Gen
Yeah.
X moms are a huge part of that, and supporting them, and but validating stay-at-home moms has to occur. And there
I
was
think
this
it has
huge.
to.
It does. There was a
Yeah.
shift to validate women going back in the workforce. And I get that. The pendulum had to swing away from the 1950s housewife, and that's all you do. We had to
Yeah.
shift it. But we
Yeah.
got to bring it back, and we have to value the stay at home mom. as not a threat to working moms. We've been pitted. That's another area they've pitted us against each other. Working moms against stay-at-home moms. That
Yep.
we're judging them and they're judging us. And that's bullshit too. So we have a lot of work to do coming together as women before we
Yeah.
can even take on this stuff with men.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah. No, I agree. Because I always felt like that. Like, I always felt like, okay, everyone's judging me because I'm a stay-at-home mom. I had to constantly validate myself. But then you talk to, the women who are full-time working and they feel judged because they're not there for their kids. So everybody's feeling judged. Nobody's good enough. No matter what decision you make, it's not the right one, But I think it starts with and this concept that I have with the male earner, like my husband earning everything and me being at home, and us both being like valid as part of that income, and so therefore we're taxed as two people. I think starting somewhere like that is really acknowledging the work that we do. Like, that's starting to validate it, right? Because nothing validates it. Nothing validates all that work that goes on at home. There's no income for it. There's no cheers for it. There's no rewards. There's no titles. There's no nothing. It's just seen as nothing. Whereas little steps like that, where if they could go, okay, because you're at home 24/7, he can be out of the house 12 hours a day and he can totally focus on that job. So therefore he can bring in enough income to cover two people, but he wouldn't be able to do that if it wasn't for you doing this actual massive job. And so if you could say, okay, that income is taxed as two people bringing it in, that type of thing would start to make a shift because you're acknowledging a workload that's not acknowledged at all. And there's no income for that. Theoretically, it's not like the government go, oh, we'll pay you to be a housewife. So that's quite difficult. But you could say, okay, the tax bracket covers two people.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't do that if I wasn't doing this. So it's like, well, we're both part of that income. So
absolutely.
It's little shifts like that.
Yes, because right now it's free labor, right? That's how it's viewed. It's free labor. If you really get down to it. And if you aren't with a partner who views the money he makes as your money, because not every partner views it. A lot of partners that are the breadwinners are like, that's my money. And then I'll give you part of this money. Like they play that game. But they've had the privilege of being able to pursue their career with zero worries about what's going on in the home front. The home front is covered. So they can go and climb this ladder, whatever they're doing, right? And make the money. But the partner has to say, we are a team and this is our bank account and this is our money. And yes, we will make decisions together, but this isn't my money. If that's not acknowledged, then
that's step one.
First. That's step one.
See, my husband's brilliant like that. Like it's us and we're doing it together and we're in it together. And so, so which is brilliant. But then he gets penalized. So we know people, who are earning half as much as him, but it's coming from two incomes. So they pay so much less tax and then the after-tax income is kind of similar. And it's like, well, that's not fair because that's just, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, interesting. Because we have a concept of, what the hell is it? It's like a head of household. It's joint filing. When you file your taxes with the federal government, you file as a couple. It is a joint filing.
We don't have that. It's an individual filing. So what you'll have is, even though, like, say you got two people earning and their joint income might be half his, our take home could be similar to theirs because once you earn over X amount, you start paying, 50% tax or whatever. And so therefore, our take home is a lot less because it's only on one person. So it's saying he's earning all of that. Whereas,
okay, so is what she's talking about though, is that occurring when we file though? Is what me being home being quantified?
It is because we do, we have, our tax system is, honestly, our tax system's better than the rest of the world in that sense, in that we do get to take home more income than everywhere else. I don't know what your top tax bracket is, but ours, you almost assume you're in the federal government's taking a third, and then the more you make on top of that, there is a progressive tax, and they take more, right? But we do get to say, we get to choose like number of dependents, so you get deductions. Say I make $1,000, I might get a deduction for $100 for one kid. I get a deduction for myself, for her, and now, so you start to get some deductions.
So your taxable income comes down before it's even taxed. So you hit a different 100%. Bracket.
And we get to choose as two. We file as two people together. So Yeah, it's different.
He files as an
Yeah,
individual, and therefore we're
you
taxed.
get
And
no
I
credit
don't.
for you or the kids.
No,
Oh, that's
Oh,
crazy.
okay.
Yeah.
So he doesn't even get to claim your kids as dependents?
no. If you earn X, you're
Uh,
taxed X. That's
Yeah.
it.
I
As
No,
far as
no,
I
see.
you get the
understand.
best tax in our state
Okay.
of Florida. We pay no
Oh,
state tax.
yeah.
Other states like California, I think, is 10 to 13%. New York is 10,
On
13%.
top
New
of the
Jersey
federal tax. So you have
on
like a
Yeah.
top
state
of,
tax and
yeah.
federal. Ah, okay.
But Florida doesn't have one. Neither does Texas. That's why so many
Yeah,
people are
No,
moving
right.
here.
we do probably have one of the best, as much as we bitch about it, we do have one of the best tax constructs and probably in the world.
Yeah.
You know, in the developed, you know, the UK taxes people like crazy, France, all of Europe,
We're like the
Australia.
UK system. Yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
So it's crazy.
So what she's referring to is that already happening
I
in the
can't
US?
imagine. That's such a penalty.
No, but like, is it acknowledging me home, our tax?
Ours does. Yeah. We file
It
jointly. So
acknowledges.
we
Okay.
take both of our incomes and then we file as one unit.
As yeah, so but your taxes bracket like so so say if you earn 50,000, you're taxed at 20%, but if you earn 100,000, you're taxed at 50%, for example, then as a person. So if you're getting 100,000, but there's two of you, that's taken as 50-50, so you're still only taxed at 20%. Do you know what I mean?
I think so. Yeah. It's
That's
almost
good,
like,
actually.
yeah. So say if I made 100,000 and she made 100,000, we were now filing with the federal government for 200,000.
From
And it
two
would probably
people.
be, yeah, a combined income for two people and then whatever dependents we have.
Yeah.
So then it would
so
get
they
lowered down.
factor in how many people are earning that, and as a stay-at-home mum, you're counted as that earner.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But the
That's
rest
actually
of the-
quite progressive then, because we're definitely not like he's taxed. So if he earns 100,000 and 100,000 hits a 50% bracket, he's taxed at 50%. And
Yeah.
the fact that I'm at home allowing him to achieve that doesn't
You get no
come
credit.
into it. Nothing.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
No,
it's
this has
crazy.
been
Like I say,
eye-opening for me as far as our filing taxes.
oh
'cause-
no, you have to assume if you leave this country, 50% of your income has gone to the federal government. And
Pretty-
that's crazy. Then you go to Europe and you're paying a VAT. Do you have a VAT there?
No. Well, we have a GST depending what you buy, goods and services tax, which is a bit
Okay.
different. But yeah,
In Europe, there's a value added tax of, and it's not,
yeah,
you know,
yeah. You pay at the till. You pay a different
Yeah.
tax, but it
And we
depends
do
where you
too
live.
here.
Like
yeah.
you know, like we have a lower tax. I don't know whether ours is one of the highest or whatever, but yeah, from a certain level, you're paying 50% tax, and so if one person gets to that, then you're paying 50% tax. But then under that, you know, that it's progressive, like you were saying. You know, if you earn
Yeah.
10,000 a year, you might only pay 15. You know, it's like a progressive thing. But because
So-
it's counted as one person, then it
Are we the
doesn't-
only country that acknowledges head of household?
I won't.
I reckon
wouldn't do
Germany
that.
would. I don't know. Germany
Yeah.
probably does. I mean, there's other countries like Germany's it's different in that way.
I
The
think,
taxes.
what is it? Monaco doesn't have a tax, I think.
Really?
That's why a lot of
Yeah.
those F1 drivers.
Oh, that makes
Yeah, they
sense.
live in the.
Well, that
Yeah.
makes sense
Yeah.
in what you're saying.
No,
Well, it's just
Yeah.
an example of one way of acknowledging
one
the
way.
role at
Yeah,
home,
yeah,
right? Like, you know,
Absolutely.
just these small
Absolutely.
things, there's
Yeah.
a million of them, but that's one thing that you
Yeah.
could change. I mean, you guys are already doing it, but we could change that. And then at least
Yeah.
you value your role a bit more. Like it helps towards acknowledging the
Yes.
value of that role, like how that role helps society.
Validating
Like,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
One thing we've had here, it feels like, you know, Australia, the US are very similar paths in terms of the cultural evolution of things, and the same challenges and stuff. Has your family unit over time then started to diminish because of the financial pressures for two people to go out and work? Like here in the US, right, at the family unit's really kind of a lot of pressure on it for both moms and dads, you know, husbands, wives, both partners to go out and get jobs. Now we pay for healthcare. I mean, for
Yeah.
childcare. And are you guys you have to be in the same situation, right?
Yeah,
Australian-
there's a lot of two income families, you know, a lot of both parents have to go out to work, and I guess that means yeah, the mum's at home less, and the kids, you know, there's probably less dinners around the table and a lot more stress. And absolutely, I think. And I think also the shift, and I don't know if, I mean, this is probably globally, I don't know, and it could be, it's culturally though as well. But a lot of us don't live near our family, right? You don't live near, I don't live near my parents. I don't live, so there's not even that kind of like I see it with my sisters, right? Because they both live up in the countryside still with my mum. And when their kids were little, like one sister would be there if you know, if she wasn't, or my mum would be there, and they could all help out with the kid. And so there was still that broader family unit, you know, it might not have been the nuclear, but they were still, I mean, my sisters worked in the schools, so they could do the same hours as the kids and stuff. So they were around a lot anyway. But at least you had that kind of next layer of family that were around, whereas we're pretty much going on alone. Like, you know, you're down here, and so if both are working, there's not a grandma or an auntie that might go, oh, I'll be there for dinner. I'll get you help out, or I'll, you know, so you sort of lost that layer as well. So whilst the nuclear family operates differently because people are so busy and stressed, you don't get the chance for that kind of around the dinner table. But I think, I mean, we live in a bit of a bubble. The part of Melbourne I live in, Bayside, it's, I don't know, I don't know, it's kind of different. I feel like everyone's got this sort of rosy family thing going on, but it's harder to maintain. Like a lot of the time you come home and you haven't got time for dinner around the table, or you're eating in front of the TV, or you're doing whatever. So it is different. Like when we grew up though, because Dad was a builder, he was home at 4. You know, he'd play cricket in the backyard with my brother or do things, and we'd be helping Mum with the food, and then we'd eat as a family, and then we might go off and, you know. So it was different. You know, you were in each other's lives in a different way.
Yeah, it's like that here too. It definitely has changed like that. Well, so you mentioned that you wrote a novel. Is that something that's still for? Did you get it published?
No, so I have an agent. So I wrote it. It was a half-hearted effort to do something, right? So I was like, okay, I've got to be doing something. So I thought, I'll write. I'll do that. So I did write this novel, which I just before COVID got an agent for. Haven't got it published, but I had to change it a lot, and COVID struck, and I was home with the kids. Because in Melbourne, you know, we were locked down more than anyone in the world.
I
So we were locked
know
down for
you
nearly
were.
2 years. It's full
Yeah.
on with both the kids. And
Jeez.
the confidence thing again, I didn't want to put it out there. I was so nervous. No one's read it. My husband hasn't read it. So what I did in COVID, I wrote a
Wow.
second novel. After that, I started writing a second novel. So the second novel I actually really like. And I finished it just when I had a lot of trouble with my son. He stopped going to school, grade 5, after COVID. We had 2 years lockdown, then we had that. So I kind of abandoned it. It's an interesting journey because initially I started it to prove I was doing something. So that was my first novel. I'm just going to, no confidence. But second one is actually a concept I really like, and it's tied to a lot of stuff that I really would like to. And I quite like it. It's finished. Well, it's not finished. It needs to be edited. I've got the fit, but it's sat there. It's sat there now for the 2 years I was helping my son. He was home doing all the stuff. And then Aileen and I started the podcast because I was too nervous to get my novel edited almost because I'm like, but then I got to publish it. I just did that imposter syndrome. I just can't, you know, it was easy to write. I write it in like a few months,
Right.
you know, but anyway, so it sat there. But since her and I started doing the podcast, and since I've hit post menopause, so the perimenopause period was full of anxiety and brain fog and all the crap going on, right?
How old were you, do you think, when you hit Perry?
38, I reckon. I was young.
Okay. Yeah, no, it can hit as at starting around 37. So
Yeah.
that's, I mean, that 38. So how did you know? Did you know you were in Perry, or did you
No.
think you were just going crazy?
Thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
Thought it was crazy. I was exhausted all the time. I couldn't remember things. I had asthma. I had all this stuff, you know. And the doctors were testing me for diabetes. I mean, all the stuff, right? Nobody knew anything was going on. And I moved to Australia at that time as well. So I came to Australia when I was 41. So yeah, I'd been going through it. And then I got to Australia, and then, yeah, it was terrible. My mental health was, didn't want to come back. Can you imagine coming back to Australia after all those years? How traumatic that was for me to now live here as a stay-at-home mum. So not only was I not having a label anymore, I was back in my country, so I wasn't abroad, all the stuff. So
Right.
you can imagine the mess of, you know, perimenopause plus that, and then
Yeah.
COVID hit, you know.
Was it a
Yeah.
year or two after your daughter?
So my daughter was 4 when we moved here. Yeah. My son was
Okay.
6. So
And then, so you've moved back, you're a stay-at-home mom, which that's not giving you that validity to the outside. You feel at peace with your being a
Yeah.
mother, but
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
anxiety's creeping in, and then you're hitting
Absolutely.
perimenopause, so that's just going to amplify
Perimenopause.
all the things. And then
Total
COVID hits,
mess.
and you guys were totally locked down.
Totally locked down. And we were going to head back then, actually. We were going to go back to the UK then, which I was like, oh, thank God. I don't have to worry about the pressure anymore. But then, yeah, lockdown. And so we stayed. So here we are. But yeah, so it's a total disaster. Like perimenopause plus all of that. You can imagine.
No.
Was
So how
yeah.
did you I know when I was going through peri and I didn't know, I was a functioning alcoholic. Like I would have a drink or two every night just to like deal with the stress of I had a high schooler, I had a middle schooler, and I had a 4-year-old. And I'm in my 40s and I'm unknowingly going through perimenopause and I think I'm going crazy. So I would have like a glass of wine or two a night for like 10 years. You know, looking back
Yeah.
now, I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's how I coped with it. Not no,
Yeah.
I didn't have COVID because we're in Florida. We were locked down 2 months. But
Yeah. Different.
you know, little different.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
did you have any coping, not knowing you were perimenopausal and you had all that stuff going on, did you fall onto any coping mechanisms?
Um, Not well. I drank every night anyway because I'd have my husband and I would always drink a couple of glasses a night. So that was my,
Yeah.
you look forward to that at the end of the night. But I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
sleep
yeah.
a lot. Went into huge anxiety. I talked. That's when I was talking to Aileen a lot, my podcast co-host. You know, her and I, 'cause she was in London. She was in Spain at the time. London. Every day, leaving like half an hour voice messages. We'd pick it up, and so I had that out there. So I talked a lot. But,
Okay.
but the thing is, you're talking about stuff as if you think you're crazy. You don't talk about stuff as if, oh, I'm going through perimenopause, I'm feeling this. You're like, oh my God, like this is a disaster and that's a disaster. You know, you're in the drama because you think it
Yeah.
is a drama because you're just going with it, right? And then I went on anxiety pills. That's when it helped. I started to take anxiety medicine. That helped a lot because I was like, oh, okay, you know. So I
Yeah.
got through it in all sorts of ways, I suppose, and I don't know, you just do. Yeah, I had a drink, I took the anxiety meds, and then by the time they suggested I might need HRT, I had already just had blood clots. We'd been in Cambodia the year before and I'd sprained my ankle and had these blood clots and stuff. So then they said, don't go on HRT because I had the blood clots, so at that time anyway, and then I got through it. I reckon 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, because all of a sudden, I don't know if you experienced this, but because I couldn't do anything, didn't want to get my book out there. I was still anxious about everything and nervous, all the stuff was amplified. All the stuff over all those years was like doubled down
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, it's crazy. And so I thought, okay, I want to do something. And Aileen and I decided to start the podcast. I thought, okay, all of a sudden, just before that, I felt confident. Not confident, wasn't confident. I didn't care what people thought. All of a sudden, I was like, I don't care. So it was a liberating experience. And then her and I started the podcast with no idea what we wanted it to be about. But now we've totally moved into the self-worth area because we've both been victims of that whole thing of putting your self-worth on external things, and defining success by money and by whatever. And,
Yeah.
so it's become that journey, but it was just that post-menopause, I think, hit. And all of a sudden, I don't know, did you experience that? I was just like, I don't really care. It doesn't matter.
I mean, it's because your estrogen dropped. So the estrogen it just went away. And that's the hormone that makes us want to nurture and take care of everybody except ourselves. And so once that's gone, to be blunt, you don't give a fuck anymore. You have no more fucks to give. And you're like, I don't care. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm done. Like I woke up one day and was like, I'm not cooking. I'm not cooking dinner. And I do still randomly, but I was cooking Sunday through Thursday for 30 years. And I woke up one day and was like, no, I'm done. And so now when I cook, it's because I want to. And I was never a takeout person or except Friday, Saturday. But I'm like, I don't care. And it's that I don't give a fuck anymore. I'm going to focus on, I think so many Gen X women, menopause is a tool that gives us the permission to finally self-prioritize and focus on ourselves, downshift, look around, breathe, and actually consider who am I, what do I want, where am I at? Unfortunately, though, it can take a beating on our health. We have to take our health into consideration and our hormonal health. So it's the balance of dealing with our hormonal health, but still holding on to that confidence and that that strength for
Yeah.
ourselves, reclaiming our energy.
Yeah.
So it's that balance. I did go on HRT, and
Yeah.
that helped me level out. That helped me level out.
Yeah.
And if
Okay.
I'm not on it, I do get hot flashes still. Um,
Okay.
I have trouble sleeping still. The progesterone helps with that.
Yeah.
And the testosterone helps with libido. So
Yeah.
I do still I need something or else I'm still wacky, and I am postmenopausal. I don't have any more. My estrogen went.
Yeah.
So they said I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
menopausal now. But
Yeah.
I am amazed that you went through it without any hormonal help. I don't know how
Okay.
you did it. I'm
No,
amazed.
well, I don't know. I mean, for years I lived on Red Bull as well. That was my other thing. Because if I had to get something, because I was a grafter, I was a GenX grafter. I'm like, I've got to write this
Yeah.
novel or I've got to do this.
Yeah.
So usually about 3 in the afternoon, I was like tanking and no energy. And even when I had the kids in London, they were little, and even just to get through. So I had Red Bull in the fridge. I was like, okay, get a Red Bull, and then I've got an hour in me. I've got an hour. I can focus and I can do this. So that's how I got through, and I like in a way functioning. And then when the anxiety got bad, then I went on the anxiety medicine,
Yeah.
and that kind of helped. And then I was coming out the other side. So, I mean, even now, I could go on HRT because they've realized that my blood clots aren't a product of the same mechanism. So it would have been
Right.
okay. But now
Right.
I'm feeling good. I don't get hot flushes. I don't have brain fog. I mean, my anxiety is up and down. I still take that because I've been an anxiety sufferer forever. So that's something I should have been on years ago
Right.
anyway.
Right. Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
but otherwise, yeah, I don't really have anything. So I'm like, well, if I go on HRT now, does that mean I just get other hormonal stuff might come back? So I'm a bit nervous of it. Do you know what I mean? Like, because I feel fine. I'm like,
It's
if
something
I
to
bring
look
it in,
into. Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. The only reason I would suggest you even meeting with an endocrinologist to talk about it, or I don't know, in Australia, we can get hormones through endocrinologists through our OBGYN, and then there's just hormone specialists. But they are finding that women who are on HRT, it's helping prevent Alzheimer's and dementia. The estrogen protects the brain, and it
yeah,
protects the
okay.
heart, and it
Yeah, I've
protects the
heard that. And the
organs
bones and
and
the
the bone
ligaments and yeah.
and the
No, it's
ligaments.
definitely a good thing. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
health wise, they're
Yeah,
saying like women should always be like just stay on it, even into your older
yeah,
years. And then
yeah,
I also have estrogen vaginal cream. Now I had surgery, so that's part of my post-op care.
yep,
But I'll always be on that because they say as women get older, they're more prone to UTIs as the tissues in our vaginal wall change because of the
yeah,
lack of estrogen. And UTIs then a lot of women die in their elder years from untreated UTIs. And so they're
yeah,
saying for your vaginal health, use estrogen. And those are two different, that stays localized. It doesn't go into the
yeah,
blood,
okay.
like how the patch. Just
Yep.
something, I just like to bring it up and always put it out there that even if you're not symptomatic, there's still other
Yeah,
benefits.
absolutely. Well, no,
Yeah.
I absolutely agree. And I've explored it a few times with my doctor. I'm just always nervous because of my ability to go up and down with, like when I was
Right.
even on the pill. I had to go off the pill because it was a nightmare. I had so many,
Right.
I got severe depression from one pill. Hormones have
Yeah.
always been really tricky for me. And I think because I spent 10 years in this perimenopause hell without knowing about it, and I finally feel good, I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, what if I go on? I'm just nervous. And I've spoken to
No,
her a lot
I know.
about it because I agree because I've got osteopenia. So,
Mm.
if I'd been on HRT, maybe I wouldn't have developed
Right.
that. And
Right.
so now I'm treating that. But yeah, I definitely need to address it. But I'm just so nervous because for the first time in
Yeah.
10 years, I feel normal. And I'm like,
Yeah.
can I just not mess with that for a while?
Yeah. No, and you're young enough still because how old are you now?
I'm
Right now.
49. I'm 50 this year. Yeah,
Okay.
49 now.
You're not
So
quite I'm 55. So you still
yeah.
have some room to sit
Yeah, like
back,
I could go in it in a year or I could
you could yeah.
dip in.
There's so much information to research and everything.
Yeah.
But now that you've gone through 10 years of perimenopause and you're on the other side of it, what advice would you give to millennial women who are either have that on the horizon or may even be in the midst of perimenopause and don't even realize it yet? What would be some advice you would give?
I just think don't put up with feeling crap. If anything feels crap, whether it's you're tired, whether it's you can't think properly, or you're emotional, or you've got pain. Like, just don't put up with anything, because I think that's what, especially Gen X's, we learned to just put up with stuff, right? You did. So even all these symptoms, I'm like, okay, I'll just work it out. I'll get through. And I think regardless of what you're feeling, everyone should feel good. And if you don't, deal with it. Find out why, because
Yeah.
we shouldn't not feel good. You shouldn't not be functioning, whether that's from hormones or anything, but especially with the hormones, because it's such a ride. It's such a ride, and you need help to get through that. We have modern medicine. We're able to sort it out, and just don't put up with stuff. Don't put up with not feeling good. I think that's the thing I wish I'd sort of told myself.
Yeah, no, I think that I wish somebody would have said to us, you have a right to thrive, not just exist, not just survive, but you have a right to thrive. And so own that and get things checked out, even if it's your thyroid, your hormone. You don't need to grind through it. You have a right to thrive, not just survive. And
Absolutely.
I think that's a message that I, as a Gen X woman, really try to get out to the younger women.
Yeah, and put it out in the workplace as well. I don't think it should be that, you've got, because I know some friends who nearly quit. One did quit her job because she's just too foggy or too, whatever. Put it out there in the workplace. I think the workplace, it has to be normalized that we go through this crap, and and we're still the same smart person, but just we're not quite there yet for whatever reason. We need the help. We need to change, and that way they might start forming roles around, how we function differently in perimenopause. And it's talk about it. Tell the workplace, don't put up with anything. Don't put up with feeling inferior because you can't think today. I think we have to speak about it.
That's part of a step of changing that patriarchy we were talking about. There's an example right there. There's an example. So when did you meet Aileen?
I met Aileen. I was pregnant with my son. I didn't know I was pregnant, but her and I met at my husband's friend's birthday party. So she was friends with my husband's friend. So my husband knew her longer before I knew her. Yeah. So we met and we just clicked straight away. We were in this park, and weirdly that day we were chatting, like really connected. When you meet someone and you're just like, you've got all the same, you've got all the things. And we were sitting chatting, and literally a branch fell out of a tree because my husband kicked a ball into the tree, hit my head, split my head, blood flooded down, and I passed out, ambulance, stitches, all the stuff.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Crazy. And then I didn't end up seeing Aileen again until my son was born, because we were going to catch up and all the stuff. And then, we met up when my son was born, because she was off. She just retired from her job and was going off to Asia. We chatted then, but because I was in motherhood and everything, and then randomly, when I was pregnant with my daughter, she sent me an email, but to the wrong person, to another Julie. And so then we ended up, I'm like, oh, wrong person, but hey, how are you? And then we found out we were pregnant, and then we just wrote every day, long emails back and forth. She moved to London, had her daughter. Our daughters were born a day apart. So we hung out. And then, she moved, and then we just voice messaged every day. It's just that, connection. So
I love it.
Nice.
I love it. And then when did you guys decide to create the You Keep Me Sane podcast?
About 18 months ago. So not long ago. We just, because we're voice messaging every day, and we said, oh, let's just kind of have these chats on a podcast. So that was our first thing, because she wasn't working. I wasn't. We were like, okay. And I mean, now we're getting more serious about it. Like, we're honing in on what we've had, like, people write to us about self-worth. I think it's a massive theme for a lot of women our age. They realize their worth has been pegged to things outside of them for a long time, and so we're sort of honing into that now. But initially it just started, we're like, let's just chat. We're doing it, I don't know, and it's helped us a lot transition from being at home to going, okay, we're doing something. And so it's good.
Is your platform going to mainly focus on Gen X women or women in midlife and that experience?
It's more midlife, yeah, definitely. But it's about self-worth. I think it's about, and it probably will resonate with different categories of women naturally, because it's sort of focusing on those pain points of, where you doubt yourself, you regurgitate a decision you've made over and over, or the things that we all do that indicate low self-worth. We just want to help people understand that, and shift that value of yourself that's external onto internal. So it's just talking about that a lot and why that happens and helping people understand how to build that.
How much do you think, as women, and I'm going to speak for Gen X women because we're the ones in midlife, although the older millennial women are too. How much do you think downshifting and regulating our nervous system and getting out of fight or flight and finally breathing and being instead of doing, how much do you think that is pivotal at this point in our lives right now into finding success into the next stage we're heading into?
I think it's hugely pivotal. I think that that's what we need to do to actually try to live in society as us, because we haven't been, and to be able to bring to the fore all of the amazing things we have to offer, which we've never valued. We've never valued who we inherently are. We've only valued what we can do that fits into a system that we didn't actually create, So I think it's a massive part of that process, bringing us back to valuing who we are as individuals, what we can offer the world, because we don't value it. Nobody values that, in our generation especially. It's like this abstract role.
Finding authenticity. But I think
being yourself.
That can be challenging though, right? If we've been in roles or had imposter syndrome for most of our life, or been grinding through our childhood and most of our adult life, the challenge of finding out who we are authentically, I think, can smack a lot of women in the face of, holy crap, I don't even know who I am right now.
Yeah. It's so disorientating because you don't know, and that's the moment I hit when I was with my kids in the kitchen, when they're a bit older. My son had gone to school. I was always in the kitchen. So all these moments I had where I remember things, I'm always visualizing myself doing this. I'm like, when I was trying to scramble for validation in some way, like, because I hit a moment where I'm like, people are like, oh, what do you do? What do you do? Where are you going? What's your job? And then it hit me that moment. I thought, my God, I don't even know, because I feel like I've got to tell people I'm this, that, and the other, but actually I have no idea what it is that I bring to the table as a person without any of that. And that was the moment where I realized I'd existed as an idea based on these markers, whether they're a title or an experience or whatever it represented me that was very much outside of me. I had zero idea who I was, what I actually thought, what I actually cared about, and that was valuable, actually. And I think most of us, we exist as a reaction to the world all the time. And so you're living in this external place all the time. And when you start to shift that and go, okay, hang on a minute, I don't have that marker to tell me who I am or what matters about me anymore. You sit in a void, and it's very disorientating. And I think a lot of people might not face it. I don't know. But I think what's brilliant is with the Gen X women that it hit crunch time. We went through the eye of the needle, right? Because we had to face it. We found ourselves with families, with jobs, with everything going on, hormones in the mix because we had kids older. So we went through perimenopause while our kids were still running around and doing all the stuff. And so we totally went through the eye of the needle. So it's forced us to look at it in a way. And we're like, whoa, hang on. So in a way, the momentum for it and the strength to do it comes from being in that pressure situation as well. So we actually probably are more able to do it than some other generations because we got broken.
That makes such sense, is that in a way, we've always been high functioning under pressure. And so the pressure of having to go on a healing journey because to find our authenticity, we will be the generation that actually will do it because we thrive under the pressure of it doing anything. So we're like going through a healing journey, facing your trauma,
you can do it.
Unlearning what you've been programmed through your whole life, unlearning. You're either going to do it and live authentically in a healthy way in this next phase of your life, or you're going to continue to grind and, as you say, live externally, not internally.
Well, you just die too.
And then,
you just die. You get sick. You get sick,
That's
right?
what I mean. You can't just die. You get sick, and it's
you live as a reduced version of yourself, and you're sick.
100%. Yeah.
But so in a way, though, the pressure was the gift, right? In a way, like looking back, the pressure was the gift that we can now live totally we have the choice now because we got broken, right? So you either get broken and you look at all the pieces in their form and choose which ones you want to actually take with you next, and you can make that decision consciously because we got broken. Things are made under pressure, diamonds are made under pressure, and so we had the gift of that pressure, and so we can make the choice now whether we take that shattered self and go, okay, I'm going to actually choose differently. And we can do that. Some won't. Yep, they'll be go back and reform with all the cracks and then live however. But I think we as a generation are unique in that we have a massive choice to choose differently. We see we're entering it with eyes wide open, so we can heal.
Absolutely.
I do think
and on our terms. And on our terms.
The extended gift, though, is that you guys are talking about it. And the extended gift is to the younger girls coming up who can kind of, if they can hear you and comprehend and open to what you're talking about, maybe not have some of the same shared experience.
That's the point here.
So your podcast has a tremendous amount of value, especially if you can tap into some of the younger generation.
The more Gen X women that use their voice to talk about this stuff via podcasts, books, TED Talks, clips on social media, I view it as I want us to be a resource for younger women. That when they Google something, our voices are there to say, here you go. We're here to, even when we're gone, the generations way after, I want us to be the beginning of the resources because there were none for us.
I do. None. That'll move the needle for women, right? That is what will change things.
I think that will, because we are saying we weren't raised in a girlhood situation. We weren't raised to support each other, but we are now. And watch out, because as competitive as we were with each other, if we flip that and support each other, it's huge. Women, it's huge. We're gonna talk about strength. We will support each other with our last dying breath.
Well, there's power in numbers, and you just don't have it right now.
But
as women, you're fragmented, and if you can kind of get it to, I don't want to think it together.
To your point, the menopause, we can be smart enough to use that to our benefit.
Yeah.
To not caring about certain things, that gives us the strength to support
each
other.
You're totally unshackled, right? You're totally unshackled, and it's free. It's so freeing. And now we can speak. And the thing is as well that's different to other generations. Well, one, we had the crisis moment, which has allowed us to kind of explode and let it all out. But we have the platforms now, right? You have the platforms. The voice carries further, and you feel compelled to speak because there's a platform for it. So everything's come together really for us to do this, I think. So it's powerful.
And it's coming from an authentic place and a good place and with good intention. And I think when things are created with good intention, they will travel to where they need to be. They will go out, and if that's the intention, then it will land where it's supposed to. So I'm proud of every time I see a Gen X woman come up on my feed, or I get a message from one, or even the older millennial women that reach out. And we even have Gen Z girls that will comment and say stuff. And I'm just like, this is amazing. I love it. Bring it more.
That's amazing.
It's amazing. It's like, because as we use our voice, we give them a space to use theirs.
Absolutely.
Do you have on your podcast or any comments, guys my age or older, that are just total jackasses and say stupid things? Because we do see that. Do you have this?
Not really. No, because the first year we talked about so many topics in a more general way, rather than now looking more at this whole self-worth thing. But we actually, when guys reached out, it's been more about the fact that they identify with that. They're like, because we talked about things like, how we all defined success, because we're talking about redefining success, because for someone who's deeply shy or got anxiety, success, I saw it with my son. Success was getting in the school gate, and really shifting focus, because we've all been brought up in this thing where success equals, money and things. So we talked a lot about stuff like that over the last year, and men would often hook into those kind of topics and go, Yes, because I guess they feel that pressure too, right? Like to think you're successful because it's because you've got a certain income or you've got a certain job title. Whereas men were feeling those wounds as well. So we've been kind of lucky. We've been, in that way that we've had that men feel validated and that. But yeah, I guess
That's
you get all
awesome.
kinds of people hooking in.
Well,
Yeah.
I think the Gen X men need a space for their emotional development and for their own healing journey. And
Yeah.
they can be their own worst enemy too, because we have had a lot of Gen X men that do make comments of, thank you for saying this. I relate to this, or I understand. I need to be on a healing journey. I don't know where to start. I've seen those comments, but then at the same time, we get just as many comments of guys being like, "We're Gen X. We drank from the garden hose. We didn't have trauma. You just grind through it." And so you have the two,
Yeah.
the two. But as Gen X women grow and
Yeah.
heal and find their
Yeah.
voice, if they're in a relationship or a marriage, their partner better figure his stuff out, or
They have to know
else
about it.
it's not going to work. It's not going to
It's not going to
work.
work. Yeah.
It's not going to work.
But that's
It
where
just
we
is.
have the responsibility to talk up because we have the whole thing going on, like we didn't just be brought up in an environment where emotions weren't talked about. We just grafted, you got on with it. We had that, but we also had that expectation, because of that, to step into the workforce, to do all of this, and carry the role of kids. So
Yeah.
we hit this pressure cooker that they haven't really hit. So it's different, and they haven't been
Right.
forced to crack open like we've been forced, because I'm sure they're carrying the same thing, a lot of different things, the
Ours is
need, men
much
have to
bigger.
hold it all in, men have to be
Yeah.
strong, men have to, all this, that's stuff that has to come out. But I think that pressure cooker hasn't been there for them, whereas it's been there
You're
for
right.
us.
I'll be curious
Why do you say,
if
wait? Why do you say that?
well, because so we had our emotional development was also not addressed, just like yours in childhood. But then we also had to go into work and be like on the mask. That's what you're saying, right? And be in the
Yeah, so we
masculine
had that
world
other
too.
expectation, get into the workplace, don't be a stay-at-home mum, all those other pressures. We had to deny our other role, which we still had,
Yeah.
So we ended up with this double whammy going on. And so the pressure cooker
Pressure.
was immense. And that's what's cracked a lot, and then women going through perimenopause, they're like, whoa, okay, hang on. I've been doing
Yeah.
all of it,
Fascinating.
But you
Yeah.
guys had your one role,
Not
right?
really, but
Or
no,
you know what I mean, though? Like, were
no, I don't. No.
okay? So,
No.
what I mean is this: you guys grew up with your emotional development pretty much also denied, but then you guys went to work pretty much. You weren't expected to also be a stay at home, like to take care of all the domestic responsibilities, which we've talked about before. So, women were then expected to take care of the home front and go to work. Men just went to work. So you didn't. You feel
Yeah, but for me, there are men who would want to take other, say, jobs or professions. Maybe a man being a nurse, right? That's not
Yeah.
cool, right? It's cool
Yeah.
now, but it wasn't cool. I never wanted to be that. So I hadn't experienced that, but that
Yeah.
exists,
right.
right? It's a fascinating topic. I do think you probably have one over on us in terms of the
But you're saying you had other pressures, maybe
Yeah.
to be
Well, there's a
masculine.
mold. There's the
Yeah,
masculine mold, and they definitely had
masculine
to
mold.
even my
yeah.
son's fight, he's in school and they have to address that a lot because it's a huge thing for men that you
Yeah,
had to conform to this certain image of what a man is and how a man's supposed to
Imagine,
be in the world. And that
yeah,
made you obviously reduced in so many ways. So it's definitely a pressure. I just think it wasn't a pressure that came as a storm like ours did because we had other factors that just made it absolutely impossible to cope. That was the
right.
difference, whereas I think the
Yeah,
men's journey was huge and it is huge. Still, it's an
but
ongoing issue, but
more
there weren't as
subtle
many
though.
you know what
factors
I
to
would do?
cause, there wasn't the sledgehammer that made it crack open when it did with us. I think it's just
Yeah,
slightly different journey.
yeah,
It's interesting. And I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think everything we do as humans is unnatural. And in that you do go out the house and you do go these bullshit corporate jobs to do these synthetic weird things that none of it's natural, right? It makes more sense to stay and plant potatoes or grow a garden and feed your family and that kind of stuff, right? That's more natural.
right.
None of us are doing natural things. It's
Yeah.
not natural to be an Uber driver or to be a pilot or to be an executive and to
So now you're talking like caveman stuff.
I'm just saying none of it's natural. So we're all stressed and we're all adapting and to these
So that's the
synthetic
next
things
layer,
that we've
right?
all,
Because we're
that
looking at
we've
the
all
patriarch,
created.
women trying to fit into the patriarch, but then we're looking at humans trying to fit into this
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
civilization.
Yeah.
Like it's another
Yeah.
level of,
That's
you know,
like,
I've learned
that's
one
the
thing
whole
on this
thing.
podcast. You're right. You guys are right. 100%. You got one over on us. But none of it's natural.
Talking about the pressure, though, I do think they go through their own hormonal changes midlife, and I
do.
want to do an episode on that. Andropause, they go through that.
Yeah.
But also, I wonder if part of the pressure that will help them crack or not or whatever is them having to rise to the occasion in their own healing journey to save their marriages or to save their relationships. I know a lot of people that have gotten divorced, and it's happening.
What's that called? The
Yeah.
gray
The
divorce?
gray divorce is that look, the pressure is you need to meet me here or else this marriage is over.
Yeah. So they're forced to rise because of
They're
that.
forced, or
Do
they
you have
don't.
that going on in Australia? That's probably a global thing
The
too,
gray
right? The
divorce.
gray
Huge.
divorce.
The divorce rate's massive for our age group and in general, I think. Yeah. We did a
And I
podcast on
wonder-
it actually on that. I can't remember the statistics, but yeah, huge.
Did you guys bring menopause into it at all, or how perimenopause may play a role into it? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I've had to evolve a little bit. I'll be the first to admit I've had to evolve with having kids. Kids get older, hold you more accountable as the dad. She's holds me more accountable to those things. Did your husband kind of go through that as well? Did he evolve and shift and kind of help keep sorting it out?
He's had to as well. I mean, because we have my son as well. He's been on that mental health journey, which was not natural for him. You have to learn different ways of parenting than you would have. And he's born in 65, so he was 45 when we had our son. So he was already, bachelor, 45, very different, very alpha. So yeah, his journey's been massive as well, and it's not easy. Yeah, definitely.
Because he was born what year?
1965. 65.
Yeah.
So he's is that the first Gen X, or is that the last boomer?
No, I don't think he's Gen X. I think he's a boomer. In my mind, he is. But
Generation Jones, that in between Gen X and boomer. Yeah, I think he might be like the youngest boomer or something. One of those.
A bit different. Yeah, very different. But still, his parents worked. Yeah, it's different.
I think he's like youngest boomer area, not quite Gen X. Do you have any other questions before I ask my last question?
I have two quick questions.
Okay.
Well, this one, I'm curious on your health system there in terms of women's health. I've made a subtle comment once around the doctor was having a bad day, the male doctor having a bad day, giving a woman shitty advice. I got destroyed in the comments. Is your health system better for women? Is there a higher value or importance put on women's health care than say maybe here? And
I don't know.
The menopause health.
Yeah, I don't know comparatively because I don't know what it's like there 100%. But here, I have friends who see doctors who are brilliant, and I have friends who see doctors who are just like, what's HRT? Not what's HRT, but oh, you don't need that. They won't discuss it. Yeah. So it's very much on the early stages of it rolling out to being a thing. So you got to choose your doctor. You got to speak to your friends. You got to talk to the right people because it won't naturally be picked up or talked about or acknowledged. So it's definitely better than it would have been even 10 years ago, but it's evolving. Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds about the same.
Yeah.
You have to be your own advocate. It's the bottom line.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You have to do your own research. You almost have to go in with research done. So when they don't bring it up, you're like, okay, well then what about this? Or I read that. And then, it triggers it.
And thank God for Gemini, right? And ChatGPT. Like we can now have even more ammunition.
Yeah.
Unless you're searching your dog's symptoms, then you're like, oh shit.
You don't want to know that, trust me. Okay, go ahead.
Musical. So AC/DC, huge fan of AC/DC. And then definitely went through a Men at Work phase. What's the Australian perception of AC/DC and Men at Work?
Oh my God. See, this is a bad question. I'm the worst person to ask this question because I am not into music that other people are probably into. So you know what I mean? Okay. But I grew up listening to like Crowded House. I don't know if you
Mm.
know.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
But AC/DC, I think, I mean, back then it was probably big, but now it's seen as a little more like heavy metal-y type. Is that right? It's just a little
Yeah.
bit
Yeah.
not quite as
Oh, for sure.
mainstream.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
Yeah.
totally heavy
Yeah.
metal. Oh yeah.
yeah,
Headbanger,
yeah.
headbanger stuff.
But it
Yeah.
was
Angus.
big,
Yeah.
like at that
Yeah.
time, maybe in the 90s,
Yeah.
like people were listening, whereas now, yeah, like if you
80s.
spoke to
Yeah.
some of my friends who are big musos, they would
Yeah.
probably give a good answer. But I wasn't I was listening to country music in that
Oh,
time, really,
okay.
like, and a lot
Okay.
of American country music, like, because my dad was
Okay.
into it, and and even a lot of the Eagles, and I don't
Yeah.
know, like on our jukeboxes at the pubs when we were drunk, it was all that kind of Steve Miller Band, like the joke things you could
Yeah.
sing. Like, I don't know, that's just the kind of thing. And then personally, I was listening to Lenny Kravitz, Bob Marley, Tracy Chapman. I was sort of
Yeah.
Yep.
listening to all that sort of stuff. So I never really plugged in, but I knew that that was happening. But yeah.
Okay.
What
then
about like Men at Work though? Is that even a thing? They were huge.
Yeah.
they were huge for us.
Yeah, they were big. They were big here too. Yeah. Yeah, they were big
Okay,
here.
then that made me think of something I want to ask. So growing up in the 80s, Mad Max was huge, and
Okay.
Mel Gibson
Mel Gibson.
was it was huge in America. Like,
Yeah, it was big.
Was
It was
big for
big.
you?
Yeah, yeah, it was big. Yeah. Yeah, it was
Okay,
definitely big.
was that like a national pride? Did you guys were you proud of that franchise? Because he's Australian.
He's Australian. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Mel Gibson. And it was, well, I suppose Nicole Kidman wasn't. She was just starting to come up as a
Nicole
thing.
Kidman.
Because we didn't have many international
No.
A-listers. So,
Yeah.
that was, it
And then
was a big thing.
Crocodile Dundee was huge too.
Oh,
in
oh my
America.
God, yeah. I know. And it was big here in a different way to being big there. And there's a lot of things,
Okay.
like, because I know Americans always, because we always laugh about things like, Americans often say if they're trying to sound Australian or whatever, their phrase is throw a shrimp on the Barbie. I've never thrown a shrimp on a Barbie.
You guys even call it a Barbie?
Yeah, we do call it a Barbie, yeah.
Okay.
And I'm sure people put shrimps on the Barbie, but it's not our main thing. Like, it's not like a...
That's a big thing. And have you ever been to an Outback Steakhouse in America? That's a
Oh,
chain
yes, I
restaurant here.
have.
It's
Yeah.
Australian based. Yeah.
But they
Yeah.
sold like emu. Was it emu or something on the menu that I'd never seen in the menu in Australia?
Oh, funny.
But-
Blooming
They have the
onion,
blooming
it's a big
onion.
thing.
And then do you guys say good day, or is that just something Americans think you guys say?
No, we do say good day. Yeah, yeah, we do.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So that's
but
we're not just
probably
like-
more. That's more of an ochre, like a country. I don't know. Yeah, you do say it. G'day. Yeah,
G'day.
I guess we do. It's like
Okay.
it doesn't sound as
I know.
exaggerated as when Americans say it, but I guess we do. Yeah.
I know we probably sound. These are like now that we have an Australian, we can ask those questions.
I
And
have
I've
one
always
last
okay.
question.
Go ahead, and then I have to ask my last question.
So it's a lot of kids growing up here after they graduate from high school before going to college. Some kids will backpack across Europe.
Like she did.
Well, or even when they get out of college. Do you guys have a destination like that where maybe you're in a different part of the world, right? So do you look at coming to America or
Like Thailand,
Europe or Thailand, Southeast Asia?
she went everywhere, but
Yeah, I did all of those, but I think the general trajectory for my generation was, I think it's a bit different now, but my generation was because we could get the working holiday visa in England. So a lot of people did that. So that was their thing. They'd do Europe and do the working holiday in the UK so they could get some money. So that was the thing. So you'd go and do that and live as a backpacker across. And then now, though, I think a lot more go to Southeast Asia. So they probably, I mean, I went to Thailand and India and a lot did, but the ones that would have gone to Thailand, India and all those were probably ones who did Europe and then, like me, didn't want to go home. And so they did other parts of the world. So they did a lot. But I think now first stop for a lot is possibly going and traveling in Southeast Asia. And still the UK because we still get the working holiday visa. And you get a working holiday visa in Germany, Sweden, Canada. So therefore, most of us gravitated to those kind of places because you could work and then you could travel, because you're away for 2 years. Like, because we're down here, you don't just say, oh, I'm going to go for 3 months. It's like I'm going for a year or two. So it's sort of different. Yeah.
do you guys, when Americans are tourists in Australia, are they do you guys like Americans
Loud?
when you see it? Yeah, we are loud. Do you like it? Are you guys like, the Americans are here? Or do you guys like how
I love
Australian-
Americans. I think
Okay.
it's yeah, no, I think it used to be more, I think now it's more like we're so used to Americans being, because there's a lot that live in our neighborhood and stuff. But I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
before we were so globalized,
Yeah.
Americans were always, because it's just loud and the accent's loud. So,
Yeah.
oh, it's an American. But not in a
Yes.
bad way. It was more just like you could know that's the Americans, like,
It's
because
the
they were
we're
louder.
chatty
You were just
too, right?
more,
Like,
yeah,
yeah, we
chatty, and
talk.
which is what I love. Like when I was in LA, anytime you'd wake up in the morning and you go for a walk and you walk down the street and everyone's like, morning, how are you?
Yeah.
And I loved that. Whereas here, like, no, everyone's just kind of, and England as well, just doing their thing, So that's what I loved about the energy
Yeah.
there. Everyone's
Yeah.
chatting to everyone. It's lovely.
Yeah. Yeah, we all say hi or hi, how you doing? Like we just do naturally. If we're waiting in line, a lot of times we'll just start a conversation. And I know that I've seen on TikTok, people are like, "Why do the Americans always talk?"
I know.
Well, I think you guys have a good reputation here. I think it's
Oh
especially at
yeah,
least for
everyone
me. I
loves
remember
Australians.
being in college and met this guy. He was on a bike tour of the West Coast, and he started in like San Francisco, and he was riding his bike up to like maybe Canada or Seattle. And I met him in Ashland, Oregon, of all places, and we had a good time. Had a lot of fun.
Americans love Australians.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you guys party.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
guys are
easy
just
going, right? Easy
Yeah, 100%.
going.
Yeah,
so
Yeah.
nice,
yeah.
Yeah.
easygoing, beautiful people, inside and out. Like I've never heard anyone say anything bad. You guys are just like you're like everybody's friend.
We have an Australian neighbor, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, we do,
Oh,
we
do
do.
you?
Yeah.
Oh,
My last question is always, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
I see myself in 5 years. Is this like a psychologically or physically or both?
Eh, However you interpret the
Metaphysically.
question.
Benefits.
How-
Yeah, exactly.
Answer
I
it.
see myself living between Melbourne and Italy, and I want to have the income to facilitate that because I love Tuscany. I see that as I want that balance, and I want to be able to see the kids and be traveling again. I want that life where I'm not just in one location. I think that because in all of this, even though I did everything to try and work myself out, I do actually love travel. I love being in different cultures. I love moving and seeing new things. And I just love that. And my husband's the same. So I feel like I want to have two bases. I want to have a Southern Hemisphere base and a Northern Hemisphere base. And I want to be able to move between the two, experience new things. I want to do lots of writing. I want my book published. I want to be a writer. That's my actual goal because I feel like that's my journey. And I hope I keep having the confidence to actually do that.
I hope so too. You should.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm here to tell
that's
you you
fine.
should.
Oh,
I
that's
know that
cool.
everyone in your life could say that, but you have to believe that. But
It's here. Yeah, exactly.
it's there. I mean, Julie, we can't thank you enough for sharing your story. I find it incredibly inspiring. And just what you've gone through and what you've accomplished in spite of your anxiety, in spite of the imposter syndrome that just you could not knock off your shoulder for so long, in spite of sometimes probably the daily battle just to be present in the moment and to look at the catalog of the life experience you have is such a testament to how strong you are as a person and beyond any achievement just that you honored your life enough in spite of all that to tackle all these things is such an inspiration. And I just have to acknowledge that. And I hope you absorb that at some point because you deserve that.
Thank you. It feels like you make me sound much more than I am, but it's lovely
No,
to be here.
I'm
It's lovely
spitting
to chat.
facts. And our and if for people that are listening to this, they just heard it. So it's you're an inspiration. And I hope you show your children the work you've done on the documentaries one way or another, because that alone is a very admirable feat. It's a dream that a lot of people have to do, and it's a special talent. And in addition to sharing about your travels with your children, because especially your daughter,
Yeah.
you talk about modeled
Yeah, no kidding.
behavior.
Yeah.
I mean, you can model everything for her. And so that
Yeah.
alone is a gift to your daughter. And what she will grow up thinking, and as she should, she can do anything. And that's because you've paved that way for her. So
Yeah.
and I
Oh,
know
that's so
you've been an
kind.
inspiration. It's the truth. It's the truth. So and then on top of that, your podcast with Aileen, that you guys have created that to help women midlife through the messy midlife, as you put on your questionnaire. And it is messy, and it's not. It's beautifully messy. It's a mess, and
Yeah.
as you said, when the pieces fall apart, and we quickly pick them up because we can't have that. But then what we do with it and mold it, and that you guys have created a space to help women figure out what to do with the pieces, is
Yeah.
a gift to women. So
Yeah. As what
you
you're
know
doing. I mean, you're amazing the way, and both of you. I think this podcast is a fantastic platform just for people to see themselves finally, just to see themselves. Like, that's huge.
that's the point, right? That's the
Yeah.
point, is to
Yeah.
help people feel seen, and to be a voice and a resource for men and women of our age, and also to help change the narrative for the younger generations coming behind us, to be part of that cultural shift. So
Absolutely. Yeah. To
thank
leave the
you.
footprints, right? We're leaving footprints so they can.
It's a legacy.
Yep.
It's part of
Yeah.
we're part of the Gen X legacy,
Yeah.
and and we're doing it with good intention. And so and I can't wait to have Aileen on. Just for listeners, we're having
Yeah.
Aileen on. So
Yeah. Oh,
but
she's excited as well. So.
yeah, we're excited. And so listeners, you need to check out the You Keep Me Sane podcast. We will have everywhere you can find Julie and Aileen in the show notes, so check those out. But again, thank you so much for coming on and
Yeah,
sharing your
thank you.
story. It
Thanks
means a
for
Really
lot.
having
excited.
me. It's been an honor. I love talking to you guys. Thank you.
No, it was wonderful, just lovely. You make me want to travel, and I don't leave
I know.
America.
I don't even leave
You
the
will.
Like
house.
there's so much in America I can see. I don't need to leave, but you make me want to go be adventurous.
You know,
So
one
Go on, do
sidebar,
it.
I know I will.
you can go on Google Maps and do the road from Sydney up to Brisbane. I've done that because my buddy was
Oh,
down there. Yeah, it's cool.
that's
Google
great. But you
Maps.
can actually see it from first. Awesome.
Yeah, it's cool.
That's cool. That's cool. So again, listeners, if you have any questions for Julie, leave them in the comments and she'll see them. Definitely check out the You Keep Me Sane podcast. All the information will be in the show notes. And if you have any questions for Brian and I, please leave them. We love to see it. And we will see you next time. Bye.
Okay.